Welcome, everybody, to Millennials Are Killing Capitalism Live. It is great to be with you. Good to see so many of you in the chat already. Looking forward to this conversation as I am as well. Make sure to do the things like share, subscribe, share this, get this out to other folks. As my friend Adnan Hussein says, don't be stingy. So, this is a conversation that I've been wanting to have for a while. Dr. Ball sent me this piece several months back, actually, I think late last year, that he's been working on Black capitalism as Black capitalist narrative, right? On 150 years of Black capitalist narrative development that is forthcoming. It's not out yet. Couple things though. I did just add a link in the show description, and everybody should queue it up if they haven't seen it already. There's a short video that Jared put out yesterday. The prestige of Black capitalism must be destroyed, and we'll be kind of referencing some of the concepts that he does in that video. So, and we'll probably talk about some of them as well. But definitely check that out if you haven't already. It's a great like short, it's like 25 minutes or so, talking about the concepts of the prestige and Black capitalism and working with actually George Jackson's writing on prestige in Blood in My Eye. So anyway, without further ado, just make sure I will say that you are, subscribed already to I Mix What I Like, Black Liberation Media, and also head over to African World Order and subscribe to that channel as well, since Earn Your Liberation is back and it's on that platform and it's as good as ever. So make sure that you are connected in and can follow all three, the shows that Jared's a part of on all three of those platforms. So without further ado, Jared Ball, good to be with you, man.
Man, thank you very much. It's always good to talk with you publicly, privately, and to be back on this platform. It's an honor. Thank you very much. And I caught it just as we were wrapping our pre-show discussion, and I'm saying pre-show is foreshadowing intentionally. To thank you for the bookshelf shuffle. That's an honor also. Thank you very much. So yeah, it's good to be here.
I should say so about that. Like I do this, and like I was having the hardest time finding I Mix What I Like, and I was like, "Fuck, like where is it?" I was able to find a. I was no. No, I was just like, where are my media? Because I have everything. I have a weird system, and then I'm also, because I'm always putting stuff up behind me. There's piles everywhere of stuff.
No, I'm not
surrounded.
surprised though that you would have an organized bookshelf like that, or whatever, something like that. I'm not surprised.
The problem here's the big problem. So it's about, I organize it according to like geographically, and this poses some problems. Because for your books, it's like, why are they not in the Baltimore section? But I do have a couple of other like counterinsurgency media studies. Like there's some stuff where it's like, it doesn't really make sense to organize it in relation to like where the author is from. And then I get into discussions about like, well, should I base it on where they're from or where they're writing about? Because sometimes those are not the same thing. Walter Rodney is very complicated in this way, CLR James, et cetera, right? So anyway, enough about my book organizing.
No, you should do like it should be like a Patreon special.
Yeah, I need to create like a Dewey Decimal System for my books. Yeah. Anyway,
exactly.
So let's just start out with this. First of all, the piece is great. People are not going to get to see it for a while, so I don't.
Yeah, man. It's like almost like the day we set this up, or the day after, they sent an update, and I saw the email, and I initially saw it, and I said, "Oh, this is dope," because I'll be able to come on here and say it's about to, because this has already been like a year plus thing already, and then they said sometime in 2027, and it's all, we can come back to some of the contradictions in terms of how I got to be a part of this, but it's part of an anthology, and I don't know why, I know academic publishing does this sometimes. I'm suspicious that people that they really want to be involved were late. submitting their stuff. So my stuff is in on time because they're not going to hold it up for Jared. But I think there's a couple people they might have been like, we need that. I don't know though, but yeah. So I don't know. It'll come out eventually, but I'm at least happy to talk about it here. And
Yeah, no, it's a good piece. It'll make for a good conversation. It's obviously in line with a lot of work that you have been doing for some time. One of the things I appreciated about it is like I remember we've had a couple of different conversations with you, Josh and I solo, around the Black buying power work that you've done, the two editions of the Myth and Propaganda of Black Buying Power. And, I think the first time we read it, we were kind of like, really wanting it to almost go to the Black capitalism conversation. And it's more of a specific argument than that, right? It's more, I don't want to say it's like limited, right? But it's focused, right, on the Black buying power concept, which obviously you've done. Like even before you did that book, you used to do episodes on this every year and look at the reports and all that kind of stuff. So it's something that you've been studying for a long time. Um, but this is a really nice kind of like foray into talking about Black capitalism and thinking about how to talk about it, because I imagine one of the challenges, right, is you're like a media studies scholar and you're thinking about, narrative, propaganda, psychological warfare, all of these kinds of things. And there's some ways I think in which people would want to talk about it as a political economic kind of idea, right? Black capitalism. And so let's just start with like, what is Black capitalism in your view? Like, how do you approach it and explain if somebody comes to you and wants to say, well, what is like define Black capitalism for me? How do you define it?
so I struggle with this, and what I think I want to do more increasingly, I want Black capitalism to be defined in the way that we might define the Tooth Fairy and Santa Claus. So so if you want to debate what you think about Santa and the Tooth Fairy, I mean, that's fine, as long as we understand that's what we're really talking about. And we're not talking about something we should expect to see, engage, do something for us. So I understand that so that's that. I want to talk about it as something completely fanciful and mythological and propagandistic and counterinsurgent, psychological warfare. That's what I would like to describe it, talk about it in terms of. It is meant to be a complete distraction from what are the legitimate possibilities for Black or any other community to enjoy some sense of quote unquote freedom. I understand that it's often, well, increasingly, I feel like it's being defined in a whole bunch of different ways. There's a couple of books and articles that have come out recently that I've been very critical of that are looking to define it as Black people engaging in capitalism and thriving within a capitalist economy. That is one way. And then others are say it's Black people as actual capitalists, defined as what an actual capitalist is, which is rare and rare and rarer in terms of the amount of people who would be that. But in general, it's just what people think of when they think of Black people doing business, entrepreneurialism, and being, again, quote unquote, successful within a capitalist economy. I've tried to argue that through the buying power, that it is an intentionally constructed, weaponized myth to again have real political impact in limiting aspirations and struggles and so on and so forth. And just quickly, I agree with you, and I've been trying to say this more and more, be even in self-critical. The buying power art book, I'm not embarrassed by it, but I am clear that I was trying to narrowly focus in a very liberal way, trying to reach a mass audience before they would be distracted by my actual politics, which is what I would often find happened in real life. And I think that's just a mistake. I just think I made a mistake with that. And I think I should have just been more blunt and honest and aggressive, as is my tendency anyway. And I fought against my own tendency to produce that book in a relatively quick time. That's another part of the discussion too. And all, if we're being perfectly honest, why and when I was writing that is a whole other thing. Because as you mentioned, I've been talking about it for a while. So, but anyway, yeah. So I acknowledge that, and that's why with this chapter and with probably the one other thing I will do some years from now, I'm just gonna, just want to be more aggressive about what I think is happening in terms of narrative and media and all of that. So yeah, I hope that got to
Yeah.
a specific answer there. Yeah.
No, it did. And I mean, I would just say, like, my comment is not meant to be critical, because I think by focusing in on it, and we can get to this in a minute, but yeah, I mean, maybe we could just say that, like, by focusing in on the Black buying power component, and even in this piece, what you started with is a series of responses that you have received to your work, which we've talked about, as well over the years, of people who, just go out to slander you, to call you names, to demonize you, right? To suggest that basically you're participating in a racist project against Black people, all of these things, right? And I mean, it was funny because I remember seeing you in the comments of the Rockhill recent Gabriel Rockhill interview that I did. And it is, you're right. It's a similar kind of response of this, like, circling the wagons that doesn't actually engage. Like, let's actually delve into the argument. If you have an argument with what I'm saying, deconstruct it, right? Like, show where it's wrong. And I think in that book, you do engage also in the economic realities, right? Like, so that in that book, you do look at buying power and then talk about it as narrative, as propaganda, where it comes from, how it's used, what role it plays. But you're also like, say, look, these numbers, like this the math doesn't make sense here, which I think is an important aspect of that book as well.
Well, I mean, that was, again, that's really where it started, was being in activist spaces primarily. It wasn't born out of even an academic thing initially. It was being in academic spaces where you would get in some, you've been in them, you get these really high powered analyses breaking down the economic condition of various communities. And then it would just invariably, I just felt like it kept, in a real contradictory ways, they'd be like, after this incredible breakdown of how bad things are, they'd be like, but we have this this potential. And then I was like, well, anyway, so it was just that. It was just looking at the difference between what was reported in data by actual economists doing actual study, from even whether they were radical or not, to though, and then to what was being reported, and then learning what the differences are. And I don't think it's, in that way, it was not that complicated. It was just that I don't think anybody was doing it. But I do want to say just quickly also, since you mentioned, first of all, the Rockhill interview you did and all the clips that have come out are amazing. I mean, that was really, really good. As I think most of what you do that I've seen that, on this channel is like that, but that was really good. And then reading his book. So on the one hand, because we were in an email group where this comparison came up as well, I do want to be clear, like what Rockhill has done with Western Marxism is what I would endeavor to want to do with this argument at some point. That, I mean, he really has gone in and done this incredible level of work. I haven't, but my buying power book doesn't reach that level, but the responses are somewhat similar in that to this day, I've not seen anyone who has actually read my book write or publish or anywhere publicly some sort of critical review. All of the criticism has come from people, all the public criticism, particularly the more hostile forms, have come from people who admit in one way or another that they've never read it. So at least Rockhill has gotten some, well, one that I've seen in particular, sort of scandalous review from someone who claimed to have read it, that, they put their name on it and published it somewhere. And he at least deserves I don't mean to say it that way. He's earned people writing and doing that level of response. I don't think my book does that. And it exists in part because of what I was saying about the way I wrote it in a space where people can kind of push it aside and say these things when necessary from their point of view. And that's why I also did want to start this piece. And I'm glad. I think they're going to let it stay in. There was some question as whether that intro was going to stay in, but and I did want to get a little bit. I mean, I'm not, I am childish and petty enough to say I wanted to say something back to them, and then do it in a way that then I can then show with some substance why they've been making that argument without staying in their ad hominem lane.
Yeah. So I think because people obviously haven't read what we're talking about, so you published this piece yesterday, this video yesterday, on the prestige of Black capitalism. I put it in the show description. Folks should absolutely watch it if they haven't already. You and I talked a little bit, you sent me the stuff and you were like, take a look at this. And so I think this is it's a good framework in terms of thinking about debunking stuff like, propaganda, Black capitalism, so on and so forth. But also I think the idea of the prestige helps explain the response. And even though you haven't gotten in terms of say one thing about the comparison to Rockhill, because he's attacking institutions of Western Marxism, social democratic politics, Trotskyism, so on. Those are really in many ways kind of his targets. It doesn't surprise me because they're publishers that he's really going after, that they would publish responses to it in kind of written form. Whereas the people that you're largely critiquing or pointing to, in many ways, you're not actually critiquing them directly. You're critiquing an idea that's associated with them or that they promote. They're not writing, right? They're going on podcasts. They have radio shows. They have TV shows, so on and so forth. And they do say your name and, very publicly kind of dismiss you in those spaces, right? Which I think does say something, right? Because one strategy for them would be to completely ignore it. But it probably means that enough people come up to them with this in some spaces and say, well, wait, you talk about this all the time. What do you think about this work and this response? To them say it's not even worth reading or engaging with.
I appreciate you mentioning that because I do tend to dwell in the negative. So let me also take a second to say thanks to everybody, because I do think you're right. I think there's been most of the people who have read the book have appreciated it on some level and have brought it into spaces to say, just what and I see it in they tag me sometimes I just see it in people's comment sections and on their posts, and they're like, but this guy wrote this book, did you read it? And I'm like, so I do appreciate that. So yeah, I'm you're right. Yeah.
So the concept, talk about this concept of the prestige and this video that you did and why you think this is a good frame. I know you said you used this a little bit within your classwork and also your teaching, right? And a little bit in terms of how George Jackson looks at this idea of the prestige, which I will say was really interesting for me to revisit those chapters with the framing of the magician, because I have looked at that section many times. Dylan Rodriguez also actually works with that section, and he works with it in the lens of counterinsurgency and their focus on legitimacy, right? And saying legitimacy is what George Jackson is describing here as prestige. But I hadn't actually made the connection to magic, because there's two kind of definitions of prestige that are related to one another. But one is just sort of it's prestigious, right? We're in awe. It seems like this amazing thing. We recognize the respect and all of these things that come with it. LeBron James is prestige, as a basketball player, et cetera, et cetera. But there's also this side connected to magic, which is the sort of the final act, right, of a magi where you're fooled, right? Like where
Hmm.
you are in the magician has set everything up and you're watching it, and then he does something that essentially the punchline of the joke, right? For lack
Right.
of a better word. It's the thing that you're like, oh, like he that's amazing. That happened. And how did he do that? Right. I don't understand what just happened before my eyes. It seems like magic. Right. And so talk a little bit about that concept as connected to what you want to do around Black capitalism.
So one of the reasons why I just wanted to share it and is because, one, to your point, and to the point you're making about Dylan, others have done something similar, or I'm not, I wasn't, it was more of, it's just excitement on my part. Like, I don't think I'm breaking ground. It's just like, oh, this is exciting to me. Let me, and tell me what it already exists that I've missed. But this was the first semester that I used Blood in My Eye as a textbook for my Intro to Black Studies class, and it was a fascinating and fun experience, challenging at times as well. But so I just, and just coming back to it and seeing it again, for some reason I thought of the film, and I don't know exactly when and how that connects to the film The Prestige with Christian Bale and Hugh Jackman, and which I liked. I remember liking and was fooled
I
by
did
when I
too.
saw it. I think it's, yeah. I want to see it again. Actually, I meant to see it again before today, but anyway. Um, but it fooled me. I remember the first time I saw it, so I won't spoil it for folks. But the movie I got, and I was like, oh damn, and I don't like that. So I was like, when films get me, I'm like, I'm impressed. So salute. But the film was talking about the prestige, as you were saying, in the context of magic, and then George does actually say, I mean, he says the word magic and aura, and in his discussion of what the prestige is. Exactly. Um, and in fact, so and on just real quick, because on, is it on page 47 where he actually says the word? Yeah, because on 47 he says prestige stands between the masses and a revolt against their class enemy. The aura of magic, glamour, luster, and splendid permanence covers the fascists like a protective layer of fat. Yeah, exactly. Thank you. And so I was, as we were going through it in the class, and I even said to the students, I said to them, I should have assigned the movie. Like, I should make you, just so we can have this conversation and more completely. But I would describe the film and talk, and this is, and ultimately the point I was just trying to get at is in a way to try to explain to, or to make certain points to my students about George, was to say, as I'm understanding it, this is where media and narrative creation come in to play, um to well, do all the things that I'm usually saying are being done: the distraction, the suppression of radical consciousness, the 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 illusion that this society can produce something good for all of us and for you, and that your individual pursuit of it is somehow meant to stand in for the good of the collective, and all of these other things, whatever. And then when I saw that, as is the point of the video that I did yesterday, and the Pablo Torre interview with the O's Perlman mind mentalist thing, and this Steve Baskin deconstruction of all of that, where they get into all of this discussion of what the prestige is, as you were describing it, and the extending of the deception beyond the stage of the trick. I just got excited. So I was just like, this is all I want to start trying to work with this, because this is ultimately how I see what's happening. And that the as you were describing, the podcast and the media atmosphere, that is the films, and especially after talking with Sadiq about Kanafani's Zionist literature book, like I would love to go back and start rereading some things and watching some things and just pulling out all of the Black capitalist financial literacy messaging that has just been draped over us, like he's saying, this layer of fat. It's just draped over us. So that was really, as a shorter answer, that was really it. And yeah, I just wanted to excitedly share that and see what people thought about it, and any way to involve a discussion of George Jackson, and is great. And so the word prestige triggered it, and then this other stuff sort of helped it start to fall into place, at least I think. But that is what I'd like to do, the direction I'd like to go in with the chapter we were talking about for today, and some future work, just somewhere in there.
Yeah, I want to come back to that for in a second, but I do want to just give a shout out to Louis Alday, who's the publisher from Ebb Books, who commissioned and put together that translation of Kanafani's work into English. And thank you for covering it. I actually sent the video you did to him, and he was really happy to see that you guys were engaging with the work.
I saw on Twitter. Yeah, I mean, that was dope. Yeah, the book is amazing.
Yeah.
I think what Kanafani did is amazing, and it was new to me, so I was blown away by it. But as a method, even without the politics, which are perfect, I think it's great.
Yeah. So I want to go back to this concept for a little bit. So explain the relationship for you between this concept of the prestige and Black capitalism, and the kind of, how that relates to the responses that people get when they critique it, but also kind of how it relates to, well, yeah, like like what is the relationship to you between this concept of the prestige, as a magician would talk about it, and how magicians think about like guarding their tricks and stuff like that, and what happens when you start critiquing Black capitalism?
So, and I would probably want to read some more about this. So a lot of what I'm piecing together is brand new and related to the videos I reference in mine. The Pablo Torre interview, that Steve Baskin 5-hour breakdown of Oz Perlman's mechanics and how he does the mentalism and the tricks and all of this stuff, which I really think is fascinating. But one of the overlaps that is apparent to me, and and this is where I would either have wanted to rewrite this chapter, or I will rework this going forward, because I would want to build this in. Baskin, who is himself works at a law firm in Australia and is a magician himself, uses the term meta deception, and the meta deception is what, as I'm summarizing it, is what is imposed on us, the preconditioning we bring into the magic trick. And as he says, he has that, I wrote it down somewhere. Where's that line about, he says something like our assumptions go like, I'm not going to find it now, but he says something to the effect that our assumptions go beyond the stage as well. So like we bring our assumptions into the performance that we're watching, or we're expecting to see, and those assumptions have already been messed with, is essentially the point. So for instance, the critics of my work that I start off the chapter talking about, I would want to start to talk about in terms of having been set up through the pre-show work of the manipulation of public opinion. So for instance, in the Baskin breakdown, he'll show a trick that Oz Perlman has performed on some podcast or some setting at the White House Correspondents' Dinner or whatever. And he'll go through and break down all the little tricks and the mechanics and the sleight of hand that is going on screen or on stage in the moment. But then he'll pull out the verbal cues and clues that alert you to the fact, if you're paying attention, to the fact that something happened before the show that sets up what you're seeing on camera. That, in other words, Perlman has spent time before, behind the scenes, talking to people, manipulating their phones, getting apps to be, all kinds of things are going on that they are not necessarily aware of before they go on air. That's the pre-show, pre-work that feeds into the already existing and built up meta deception that there is, in this case of Perlman's work, mentalism. That he's not just doing a magic trick, he's doing something he's trained himself to do, that he can teach you to do. This is not, in the same way my critics are preconditioned through the broader meta deception to believe capitalism and Black capitalism or Black entrepreneurialism, et cetera, and so forth, are pathways. So they're primed for the financial literacist, who would be the equivalent to Perlman's mentalism, who comes into the space and says, listen, I'm not doing some magic trick. I have the skills that I can teach you if you buy my book and take my classes and sign up for my website and invest in my this and that, that will show you how to get over, that will get you your capitalist success, your entrepreneurial victories. In the same way, Perlman says, I'm going to teach you not how to do these little things I'm showing you that we have fun with here, guessing your PIN number and all this other stuff. I'm going to show you how to get a raise, get the job you want, get the partner you want, have the life you want with these skills. So when someone like me comes in, or when Baskin comes in and says, and I'm seeing in some of his comments, a little bit at least, that when he comes in and he says this, like he starts off with, is anybody going to expose this fraud? People are like, stop hating. You're the fraud. You just don't understand what he's doing. You don't get it. And I'm like, so, and then he shows, and then he does what I feel like the equivalent to what I've tried to do with my work, to say, look, no, here, look how he's moving the phone. So or look how he puts the card. And then I'm saying, look at the data. It's right there. And they're like, no. And then all the way back for me to George, because ultimately, I understand where we are publicly, so I always edit myself, but George is right. So to get back to George being right, the prestige has to die. Because if you believe that Perlman is doing some mentalist trick, or some mentalist, not a trick rather, but a mentalist performance that you could learn to get yourself out of the morass that you feel that you're in, and then being told that that's not real is going to be too upsetting. So you're like, no. So even as in that Baskin video, he shows you, like, people see Perlman mess up. And then he does, I mean, dude is good at what he does, but he's able to gift the gab, and then they're even what they've just seen, they're like, no, okay, yeah, okay. There must be, okay, all right. Because they don't want to let go of that this is a possibility. So that's yeah.
No, I think it's a really, I appreciate it a lot, because I think also one of the things that I think you noted in the video, I know you've said this somewhere, but the people that you're critiquing are talented.
Yeah.
Right? They are skillful communicators. They are, they are effective at getting their message across, at convincing people that what they're saying, they may even believe themselves some of the stuff that, what they're saying. But it's that point, and this was an interesting part in the video from O's and his interview with Pablo and so on, is this discussion that actually, too, like, other magicians hate Perlman,
Right.
because he goes from, it's one level to do the trick, but it's another thing to then try to convince people that they can learn, that it's not a trick, it's a learnable skill that then you can do yourself, which is where, especially when you talk about, like, John Hope Bryant and, like, the the selling of product. You know, it's one thing for LeBron James is like maybe one example to use. Like, obviously he's successful. He's most, incredibly talented athlete, right? Like, only him and Jordan are in any kind of, conversation. And
Well, I'd put
has done it
Kobe in there
longer.
too, but I don't know about it. We can
Sure,
get into that some more.
sure,
I don't want to derail
sure.
us. Sorry, my bad.
No, no, no. We've done that before too. But like,
No,
and
I
I'm
know.
I'm with you. I'm Team Jordan. But they're both on the screen right now because they
Yeah,
both
yeah, yeah,
fall
yeah.
into the camp of
Oh yeah,
what I'm pointing to,
absolutely.
which is tremendously talented. I don't actually really have an issue with how much money they made through sports because they're getting the money from the owners and so on. They dedicate their entire lives to being great at what they do, right? But then they become business owners as well. They do become capitalists. There is the whole like you can't really, it becomes difficult to segregate out what they do on the court as workers on some level, even if they're exorbitantly compensated, from then now we run X, Y, and Z companies, right?
Mhm.
And, then, we are exploiting the labor of the people within these companies in order to rake in super profits and so on. But even that, then there's a third level, which is now I'm going to tell you how to do what I do. Right. And so now I'm going to convince you that the way that I've benefited from this system as a result, even of my incredible talent within it, that these are somehow learnable skills or tricks that I can teach you essentially so that then you can move through the world and be like me. Never mind that you're not the most talented athlete in the world. Like, so anyways, I
Yeah,
do think
no,
that
I
there's,
mean,
yeah.
sorry, no. Well, one of the things, and I put the clip from his video in mind that I really liked from the Prestige film is that when Christian Bale sees the Chinese magician and figures out what he's doing, he smiles and he's like, I get it. I'm not here to blow up your scheme. You did it. That's wonderful. Because it's understood I showed up to be tricked. You're a magician showing up to trick me. This is how so when you fake walk to the car after the show and all of that, you're holding the trick to the end. Salute. He's like, I love it. But that would be that, and that's fine. And that's why the magician community up to that point is fine with what when Perlman then switches. And that's what Baskin shows. Like he shows like Perlman, despite looking kind of young, is closer to my age. He's like been doing this for 30 years and started off as a magician. So he's doing all the magician shit. Now he's all of a sudden saying, I'm not doing magic. I'm doing this thing that I can teach you if you buy now you've moved into a whole other level of conning. And so I literally just had a student this semester, we went over this very thing. She said, so you're against, she said, I'm a Black entrepreneur. You're against that? I said, not necessarily. She said, I have my eyelash business. I said, great, have an eyelash business, and but then she said, there was like two layers. She said, I do eyelashes for money, but then I also teach people how to do eyelashes and charge them for that. I said, okay, that's a skill, makes sense. Okay. But then she said, I also would charge people to teach them how to set up a business, an eyelash business. And I said, now you've gone into the con. And she was like, what? What? And I said, because you're selling you're selling them on something that you have not done so that you can make money off of them. You're no longer selling a skill, an actual skill or a trade or a service. You're selling a fantasy. And she said, how do you know? I said, and she said, how do you know I'm not successful? And I said, because you're still in my class. That was my joke. Like, because if you were really successful, you wouldn't still be in class. Like, let's stop it. Like, and I even told the joke. I said, if my book sells 10 more copies, I'm quitting too. So I was like, like we're all here for, like anyway, but but that was the thing. and that's the part where the magician community rightfully gets upset with what Perlman is doing. And what I'm saying is a problem with this financial literacy thing. Obviously, if you get your own household in order, yeah, and if you don't spend your last penny on booze instead of rent or whatever, great. Okay, I get it. We should all be responsible. But when you start taking it to this next level of, I'm going to sell you on how to become rich, or I'm gonna sell you the book that teaches you that you're the reason you're poor, if you do what I'm doing, all of that becomes the hustle. And then quickly to your LeBron James point, this is also, when he did the move to Miami, I was actually team LeBron for that, and I actually was in a well, in my social circle, a very uncomfortable space of defending him, not as the player but as the laborer. And I was saying, you're damn right. You don't need GM. I said, if a GM did this move and brought him to Miami and put him with Wade, and they'd be like, he's the best general manager in the history of the NBA. But the players do it, and all of a sudden it's supposed to be some, oh, it's inappropriate. And I remember they brought out Elgin Baylor on ESPN to condemn it. And I was like, damn. I was like, why are we, but then to your point, when LeBron comes back and is used, and collaborates with his use to teach, for instance, with the crypto commercial he did a couple years ago, where he's using the mythology of LeBron James to say, if you do crypto, you can basically have my life. To your point, without acknowledging the rarity of the skill, the rarity of the physique, the rarity. And then also to the point that with all of his wealth, the rest of the Black community is continuing to devolve economically. And that's another. So I look at the data and I'm looking collectively, Black income and wealth, that number's going down. LeBron's number's going up. So I'm, where are we supposed to find the celebration? And that's where the prestige comes in. And that's where as my student was demonstrating, and many of us, it starts to, that layer of fat, it just starts to on you. It's like, you can't move anymore. You got to get to the gym. No, anyway.
No, I appreciate it. Let's talk about a couple of different things in the piece. So like, sure. You look at these, so we do know I think a lot of us know of kind of the relationship of Richard Nixon to the kind of Black capitalist narrative, and we'll come back to that in a minute. But you do look at some of the earlier ones, like even back to like right around the Civil War, right after the Civil War. So like, what are some of the variants of kind of narrative development of this idea of Black capitalism that you saw that were kind of pre that period?
So again, I mean, as is in the piece here, I mean, so part of what I'm trying to also show is that a lot of this work has already been done. This argument, as Dhoruba has said famously, we've already won so many of these battles and we're having to fight them again. These arguments have already been made around Black capitalism. So I just went back and was reviewing some of that work, including, I know a site here, Manning Marable, who looked at the history of this as well. And essentially what the oversummary is, it is, the concept emerges naturally out of the plantation. So you have basically wherever Black people could find some subsistence living, usually performing a service that the local whites were willing to pay for, they would do it. And then out of that emerges, I'm arguing, at least summarizing or oversimplifying at least, this idea that this is maybe, this might be it. They're saying there's an emancipation. They're saying, that this abstract claim of freedom and change. If even during slavery, I could set up a little shop and do the services for a few whites in the area, and relative to the rest of the enslaved experience, have a pretty good life, maybe in this new so-called free moment. And then what, of course, immediately happens is, as soon as Black people are quote unquote free, the whites who would have been their consumers go off to find whites, or the Black people leave, and then white businesses step in and do whatever the relatively quote unquote low level manual labor stuff. And then quickly, what emerges after that is this idea of, well, fine, I don't want to do this for whites anyway. Let me do this for my Black community, and I'll target that community with my business. And again, the ethic emerges and evolves and is encouraged, because this interesting thing, and you know what I just saw? I just watched this morning this new PBS special about Du Bois. It's atrocious, but
This came up in our study group last night, actually. Yeah.
Oh my God. Actually, I need to become more serious about joining one of your study groups and stop watching these PBS things by myself. That's one error in my life I need to correct. Yeah, anyway, but what they mention, because of all there's so much they ignore, but what little they quickly mention is the emergence of Booker T. Washington and his well, eventually National Business League, but the Negro, I don't think they even name it, the Negro Business League. And I think I'm getting the name, but they mention this. They don't say it the way I'm saying it here, but they talk about this moment where this idea that Black people serving Black communities, and they even talk about briefly the point in the 1930s where Du Bois fell into this, that Black people could set up their own separate economy, could satisfy their own needs and create their own separate economy. But so anyway, my point being that the idea of Black capitalism as a solution emerges as Black people see that this is the only path that they're being quote unquote allowed or encouraged to. That would be my oversimplification of it. That's a problem that prevails to this day, despite people not recognizing that this is what's happening. So while it gets rebranded as Black liberation, it's given that because that's the lane that white capital has carved out for Black advance post enslavement. But what, of course, the Du Bois documentary leaves out is his eventual realization that you can't just have a Black separate economy, that this doesn't work because for a number of reasons, including the fact that the people you're looking to serve don't have any money and can't help your business evolve in the ways that people expect. And then, of course, in a capitalist economy, even where everybody's white, there's limitations on what's going to happen for equality, labor, et cetera, and so forth. So anyway, so that's what I just try to track and trace some of that history very quickly, and in a way to try to point out that, as I just did, that this is a concept that has been encouraged from quote unquote the beginning, and then it does eventually get weaponized and taken on in a particular way. But yeah, let me just stop there for it.
Yeah, well, there's more that we'll get into for a second in it. And the context that came up in the study group last night was somebody, at least in my breakout group, was like that they had just watched it and it was ridiculous, but they said they did kind of have to admit in the last like 10 minutes, oh yeah, he sort of was a communist and had to leave the country, and like
but they do a really slick thing. So first of all, that is true. They leave everything to the very end. It's almost 2 hours, and it's not until like the last, I think I even wrote it down, where it's well into it's closer to 90 minutes before there's even a recognition. They even passingly mention that he started to look at socialism as a solution. And then they speed run Shirley Graham and communism quickly. And then they they do mention that he leaves the country. But in fact, I'm glad you bring this. I'm glad you're helping me remember, because I wanted to ask you and your audience for help here, because they do something that I think is very slick there. And they reference something I've never heard of before. Where did it? At the very end, they say something to the effect that Du Bois. So they do quickly say, so they say he tried this separate economy thing. He realizes this doesn't work. They mention he does, socialism a little bit. He likes that, and communism. They talk about McCarthy and how, Du Bois stands strong. They mention passingly Robeson and Nkrumah. But when they skip the letter he wrote in 54, I think, saying why he was not going to vote for either party anymore. They downplay, although they do reference that in 21 he voted for Woodrow Wilson as a Democrat for when black people weren't voting for Democrats, and then was disappointed obviously by Wilson. And they leave that out, that this is the trend that he would follow for 30 years, leading to him to say that we can't vote for either of these parties and we need to do something else. And then they leave out the full explanation, of course, why he wanted to leave this country and go. And the line that they say is that they quote, "without attribution." And I have not, in the hour or so I had before we started here, I've not found it and where it comes from. And the quote is, "I just cannot take any more of this country's treatment. We leave for Ghana October 5th and set no return date. Chin up and fight on, but realize that American Negroes cannot win." End quote.
Actually, yeah, we should. I'm curious, like the Du Bois scholars that are in the chat, or who may see it, or
I
yeah,
did
I don't know.
Google
I'm
looks.
I've not heard that line.
I've not heard that line either. And they. So what is the context for that? Because the way I interpret it, because they have a sociologist say what they do also very slickly. They say, not long before that is quoted, they have a sociologist say, "We would have to say with hindsight, with 2020 vision hindsight, that Du Bois was naive when in his engagement with socialism and communism," something like that. So it's almost as if to say, if you abandon the United States and leave for Africa, you're just acknowledging American Negroes can't win, without and just leaving. You're just leaving it there, like you've just abandoned us and black folks can't win. We made it. I don't know where that. But I'm sure if he said that, he would have said it in the context of a broader explanation that would have made it make sense and had some sort of radical conclusion. But they don't give us any of that. And just to bring it back here, that's the prestige. That's the trick of the people. That's PBS saying, "Ha ha." We just talked about Du Bois for almost 2 hours. Ha ha. Yeah, trust me, bro. Trust me, bro. Yeah, no source.
Yeah,
Even in the place I found it quoted, there's no citation for it. It's just in a Medium blog.
That's fascinating. We need like Gerald Horn or somebody to weigh in on.
Somebody got to find it. I mean, they got David Levering Lewis, and he's in the, of course, Henry Louis Gates and all the anyway, but you got the Du Boisian scholar there in Levering Lewis, in terms of the institutional world. You've got him sitting there. He's not the one saying the line, and it's not referenced in. But yeah, look. Rumor has it that this Du Bois guy wrote a couple things down. Might find a page number somewhere. I mean, rumor has it he did a little bit of writing in his almost 100 years of life. I don't know.
Yeah,
they don't talk much about it.
I don't remember him writing in that particular like style or voice very often, though. Like
it
the
was
first half of the quote that you gave sounded like, okay, that sounds a little bit like the Boys, and then
mhm,
like chin up, keep fighting, but you
yeah,
have no chance. There's no hope.
but American Negroes can't win. I was like, this is that's an odd. And then again, where's the context? What's the rest of the statement? Where was this said? Where was this written? Who was he talking to? Who else? I mean, what was? But again, in the context of that documentary, it's perfect. It's perfect. It's such a slick. It's so, oh man, yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, I think you kind of alluded to this in your last answer, but one of the things that I'm always curious about within these discussions, right, is how segregation and, you know, I wrote down desegregation, but that's not really a thing. But I guess the end of de facto segregation, right? The end of a legal mandate around segregation. Um, how it shapes some of the narratives here. Like, do you think that there were aspects of segregated Black life that led to different relationships between Black business owners and the Black community because they lived together, right? They were in the same neighborhoods in certain ways, and organized efforts from the Black community through organizations, networks, and the leadership of those organizations could have a bit of a they could boycott stores, they could relate to them in different ways, right? To kind of pressure folks. I mean, you even get some of this within like the Black Panther Party's,
Mhm.
heyday of them talking about like, hey, there's grocers within our communities and these stores are owned by I don't even know if they were always owned by Black people, right? But they were in the community and they were like, we're gonna go after not like we're gonna pressure these folks that if they're gonna be here and they don't want us to raise hell, that they're gonna have to do some things to support our efforts and our movement and what we're trying to do. I'm curious in your mind because I don't know how much harkening back to that past, like I'm not sure the utility of it, right? Because it's like it's not it's not like we want to say, hey, let's like all go back to segregation, right? But there is something that I've heard people talk about in terms of the relationship between wealthier Black folks in that era with their communities versus now where they don't live in the same community, largely
Mhm.
speaking. I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
Yeah, I do. And in fact, if I mean, this would be one of the threads that to which I should return in this eventual one day extended, because I think this is part of what creates that meta deception piece that I know Marissa Baradaran had talked a little bit about it. Some of the uh, Abram Harris, even back in the 30s, even talked a little bit, if I remember correctly, about this in the sense that the segregated experience and Baradaran's line that you can segregate people, but you can't segregate money makes sense. And what Abram Harris and others and ultimately what they were saying is, yeah, I mean, there is that history that I'm not recounting exactly who wrote what and when, but I do know it's been written about that. Everything you just said is largely true, that there was this proximity, there was this community, that the middle class dentist lived next to the so-called lower class janitor, like everybody was in the same block or same community because of the enforced segregation, and that by necessity created more of a communal bond and relationship, more direct access to the people that you might be saying are exploiting you. And but it also, in many ways, and now I'm thinking of what Two Black and others have written about Black Wall Street. It creates this illusion that this is actually disconnected from a broader economy. So even in those highly segregated spaces, especially if we're talking about something entrepreneurial, there is still a broader white owned economy to which those subsidiaries are beholden. There's still the shipping, the trucking, the product manufacturing, the distribute, all of these other elements are involved even before you get to the Black grocer or the hair care, whatever, barber or whatever, beauty salon, et cetera, and so forth. Uh, it also ended up creating, I think, the illusion around class that the bourgeoisie that was created. And this is why, again, and I mentioned this a little bit in my own work, E. Franklin Frazier and others who have, they, Frazier had people, he had to put up with a lot from, he got a lot of pushback and criticism when he wrote his book, The Black Bourgeoisie. We also forget, radicals like Dr. King got a lot of pushback from the Black bourgeoisie when he started, like there is that issue that happens when it's when class is brought in, there is a neo-colonial bourgeois resistance to it. Because at some point, as Abram Harris did point out, that segregated experience, that colonized experience, creates, even among the bourgeoisie or the neo-colonial elite, an affinity for the experience. Like if we lose I think about it in terms of my HBCU all the time. I mean, it's beautiful. I joke all that I can go to work all day and I don't see any white people. There's no, you can have this illusion that you're in this fantasy space, like before, and then it's just all this beautiful blackness. It's just wonderful. It's wonderful. And then you forget, well, still in Baltimore, still in Maryland, still in the United States, still beholden to the governor and to the board and to the whatever, to the military industrial complex and cybersecurity and STEM and all of that. And within that is created to be a bourgeois neo-colonial elite that they're like, I don't really want change. I'm good with this, So, but I do think that especially in terms of what I want to do, that would be something to really get into in terms of, I'm even thinking of the Tom Burrell stuff that I was looking at in the black advertising and marketing, that the prestige has been evolved over time, and Burrell being brought in by Ray Kroc, who's brought in by Nixon, so it's like this, it is this, let's create the prestige, the aura that this is a way for Black people to thrive. There's no need for radical politics, no threatening engagement or activity. We don't have to worry about any more Georges. It's just this will be great.
Just on this point, we don't have enough space to go into all of this here, but I know Black Myths podcast has done work, and I think maybe you participated in that a little bit.
Little bit, yeah, but they really drove that. And people should check that. The nostalgia, the mythology around Black Wall Street is crazy. And one of the stats I remember from their work, or something that they had me read or something, was that it was still like 95% of the Black population in Tulsa were regular laborers. Like they were paid even less than workers out in the rest of the, like they, so it was like, the mythology around that is absolutely crazy, in part driven by Black capitalists who want to say, because if we recreate, to the extent we can recreate that, and I'm part of that 5%, like the people the thumbnail is dope. Like all those people you have on this thumbnail, like they're saying, I'm the 5%. I'm good with that Black Wall Street situation. Let's promote, let's run the myth.
Sorry, I'm like boomering out on trying to do the. Hang on a second. I was trying to show the thumbnail and I ended up pulling up the wrong thing.
The poor boomers.
Yeah. I'm now comfortable with that term for myself, because I realize that I am the age that my parents were growing up when I was calling them boomers. So it's like, I can't even get away from it anymore.
And we have kids that remind us at every turn, every mistake I make, boomer.
Yeah, I mean, actually, before I go further, like, go back to the prestige concept for just a second. Just, as I was reflecting on this stuff this morning, actually, and rewatching your video, and I was thinking about this in the context of hip hop for me growing up, right? And of all of this time in which I did not live anywhere near, a major city. And so hip hop was like my window into certain things, right? Which, like, we could talk about all the variants of what those representations, were. But in particular, I lived in New York from 2005 until 2010. And it was very, in terms of the idea of prestige around this, it made me reflect on this in a little bit of a new way, because one of the things that I found when I lived there, right, was that I would see rappers, right? Like just see them in the community. And I worked for Jeffrey Canada, Harlem Children's Zone, so there was like a funny whole context around this. Jay-Z came, did a meeting, his that crazy bodyguard who died naked in Florida, you know, uh, he was there. um, what's his name? Hang on, I'll pull it up.
I don't remember this. He was Jay-Z's
Norman
bodyguard?
Norman Osterbrook, who is the Dutch giant, who was formerly the bodyguard for Nelson Mandela, by the way, was also Jay-Z's, Beyonce's, and then Lady Gaga's bodyguard. But he died in these crazy circumstances in Florida. People can look it up.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
but the point was not that. It's just that he was the bodyguard there when Jay-Z came. And I remember we all looking at this guy like he's like 6'4", this big Dutch guy. Looks kind of like the dude from Snatch, that big football player or whatever that was in all those movies.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Anyway,
know you're talking about, yeah.
so, but the prestige concept related to this, right, is that there was like Jay-Z was clearly already at that point very wealthy, right? Came in with all this pomp and circumstance, the limo and all of that kind of stuff. But I would see people like Jadakiss, Smith and Wesson, Jim Jones, Fat Joe, Black Rob, G Dep, and you would see them, and I would have conversations with people who lived in the community, and they'd be like, yeah, like that guy he's really hard up right now. Like he lives in
Mm.
this, he's still living in this project with his mom, like, and it would be like folks that are on a video like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, where they're just throwing up money like crazy, and there's Bentleys and there's, all of this. And on one level at the time, right, it made me relate to them more. I didn't have the politics that I had now, right? Because I was like, oh, they're just workers like being exploited in some way, like it's just an everyday person. But I was thinking about this through the concept of the prestige, and I never talked about this very much because I didn't feel like it was my role, right, as somebody who is there as an outsider to like blow the lid off some of these things, right? But it was interesting in that respect of like that the community also like knew but didn't talk about it, right? And so this was a certain way was thinking
Mm.
about the prestige of like kind of almost assisting in managing the deception on a kind of like larger level, right? Because there was an understanding, and their understanding would have been like, yeah, the industry's fucked up, and so actually these guys, the way that you see them on TV or whatever, that isn't really what things are. That's not really how they're living their lives. But on the flip side of it, I was like, for most of the world though, that that prestige just holds up. Like you have the Diddy's, you have the Jay-Z's, right? That like reach this level of real, like, billionaire, close to billionaire status, multi millionaire, whatever, where their wealth is truly intergenerational. It's they become business owners themselves and so on and so forth. But you have all of these artists who are also a part of, even if they're just playing a role, like even if they're just like, this is what my job is, right? Is to get into these videos and make it look like my every day of my life is living in the most ridiculous party that you've ever seen, right? That like at the same time, these folks are actually poor. Right, this is why, like, and what made me think about it too is I went to State Property Locke's concert this last week. It was great,
Mm.
but it's very obvious, particularly with State Property, that like, there's a lot of health issues that they've had.
What
There's a
happened?
lot,
Yeah.
and yeah, and like there's no safety net. I mean, I know you've talked about this before with like, should these artists be unionized? Like, of course, all this kind of stuff. Even I think Ghostface, had a thing where he was talking about
Mhm.
that there was a need for a union, um, which is very real, right? But it's almost like you can't even have that conversation because of the marketing around it, right? The idea, like, it's not so much that the money is not there, it's that the the lifestyle that's being promoted is so capitalist and neoliberal that to start to have conversations about, healthcare and unionizing, now you're talking about yourselves as workers rather than promoting this idea of black capitalism, and you maybe are diminishing your own prestige on a certain kind of image level. I don't know, but this was one of the things I was thinking about as I was looking at your stuff today.
No, I think, one of the things that really that I know will have me watching that Baskin 5-hour marathon again. And I watched it in 1.0 speed, like in regular time. Like, so I spent the full 5 hours with that video. And I'm going to do it again, because one of the things that I find fascinating about all of this is the manipulation, how we participate in the manipulation, how we're invited to participate in in our own conning, and because we're dealing with people who, as individuals like Perlman, are very talented, but also as institutions are very well studied and organized in producing this manipulation, that I just want I'm impressed by and respect our the social or our what is it, our social animal nature or whatever, as human beings, and the I don't know, trillions of processes our brains go through to get us to be able to have this conversation, and how all of that is looking for, we're unconsciously looking for social cues and clues, and all of that to say that yes, when we are encouraged. I mean, I remember as a kid, I mean, it's more obvious to me then when I looked at Run DMC, and I'm like, yes, they're winning. That means on some level I'm winning, in the same illogical way when what used to be my football team would win. I would feel great all week. Nothing changes about our lives. Like nothing. I don't make one more penny. I don't make nothing. I still got to go to this whack job. It's nothing has changed, but I feel great. We all want that. So just like that one scene I'm thinking in particular, the white podcast bros, as they call them, they're loving the mentalism thing. They're like, trick me again. And then especially when they're being told this is not a trick, this is a skill that I can teach you, they're saying, yeah, do it again. And even when they see he's messed up, they're like, their mind is telling them, no, that can't be a mistake. He's really doing this. Let him reset your mind to tell you you're being. And again, this is what happens when, like, seriously, like, I think I saw, it was like, it's probably more, but the Ian dude on Earn Your Leisure, who does the Red Panda thing, he's got like 8,000 people signed up to his investment platform. And I'm sure he's thinking that's not a lot. I'm thinking 8,000 people are paying you to teach them how to invest because you've told them you made all this money through investing and not through charging them for your investment. I was like, how could that be? And then I turn on, like CoffeeZilla just does another expose. Like people with money are being told by some guy who just got a federal charge, he'll make them 20% a year on their investment. Some crazy, like, nobody does that. You can't get 20% every year on your investment. That's just, and people are like, no, he's found the way. I don't think that they're thinking he's doing something illegal. I think that they want to believe he's found the way, and I'm the one getting on the end. And anyway, especially after watching that video, I'm more convinced of it. That the way magicians know how, they know how to mess with us, and we see anyway.
No, it's
So
important.
yeah.
Yeah, it's like Bernie Madoff, right? Like, I mean, in certain way, like you have all these rich people who invested their money with this guy, and like nobody was like, wait, like this is too good to be true at
Every
any point.
month
Like,
I'm getting a check, like it's like 5%, like nobody, there's never a down. It never dips. And it's always like, how could that be? How could that be? He's rolling snake eyes every time. He's rolling sevens every time. Whatever. It's like a 7-Eleven. What, I forgot craps now. He's rolling that every run. And they're like, no, he figured out that's not trick dice. He's not scamming. He's really figured it out. So let me bet on him. I got it. And then this other thing I want to start to do also, I want to start reading more behavioral economics, because I think that there's more answers to this in there, even if they're not written from a radical perspective. Because the few things I've read in that, this is all understood. And that's why Pablo Torre, in his thing, he says, this Perlman guy used to work at Merrill Lynch.
yeah. Yeah, we'll come back to another Wall Street or banking person in a little bit here, but yeah. So let's go to the Nixon moment for a second. Like, what's important? I appreciated in the piece you identified some of the threads here that I think are important to understand about that moment. I mean, obviously, there's the importance of the Black Power movement, the Black revolutionary strands that are going on at the time. But there's also a timing of it around the development of mass media, the development of psychological warfare, and through multiple wars, post World War II, post the Korean War, obviously in the Vietnam era as well, and counterinsurgency and marketing. So, do you think that there are some things about that moment that allow the narrative to take on an even greater significance in that period?
Yeah, I mean, in so yes, so for instance, the as we talked a little bit about the earlier formation of the mythology around Black capitalism, I think at least emerged more quote unquote naturally as a response to those conditions. To, here's the business you're allowed to do, here's the white consumer base you're allowed to reach, here's the lane you can run in when you have a Black consumer base, here's the, all of that kind of, and then you could see almost naturally, you get the Booker T. Washington version, you get the Du Bois version of a more cooperative form, a more business form, and the Booker T version, what all these other versions emerge. And then I could also see how, if at the turn of the 20th century, the was it called Bureau of Labor Statistics then already? But whenever they started doing the consumer survey studies, the ruling elite is already starting to, if not starting, but finding new ways to surveil and manipulate labor to not rebel and accept wages and not strike and perform their function in the economy and all of that. It's almost like you could start to see the colonial apparatus figuring, the tentacles started to, all right, here we go, we gotta, the plantation shifting thing, we gotta come up with this new, they're starting to come up with some ideas, all right, let's, and then there is this the work I'm, only a year or two in, really late to, but that post Second World War propaganda, just in general, from the corporate world, saying we need to reconquer America, get them off of this idea of the government being involved, and then yeah, all these other things. What are we going to do with the Soviet Union? What are we going to do with this population, that population? Then we still have this insurgent Black population to deal with, and then we have so by the time you get to Nixon, yeah, just like, I mean, all of all of the work that Orasami talks about at Tip of the Spear, all of those 1950s psychological studies and stuff that gets applied in prison, the field of mass communication is emerging, all studying psychological war, the counterinsurgency psychological warfare work that you and Dylan talk a lot of. I mean, like, all of this is happening. and of course there is Vietnam, and by the 70s at least there is Vietnam, and the rest of the decolonizing world looking to find its way. So it all that to say, it does make perfect sense in the context of a so-called Cold War and a need to suppress in the United States Black power and and anti-colonial movements abroad and all this, that point that I kind of mentioned already, that Nixon calls Ray Kroc in and says, look, I need you to start using McDonald's to offer a pathway for this Black capitalism thing to happen. And Ray Kroc hires Tom Burrell, the Black ad exec, to go and say, go create these ads to get Black people into ownership and business in McDonald's. And like, that's like, I don't mean to be dismissive to the struggle I'm most connected to, which I feel most connected, but it's almost like, look, we got all these things happening. Throw this thing at Black people here, this Black capitalism thing. Here's like a budget line. Here's a, go deal with that. And then I'm going to go over here and do this thing to Vietnam. And I'm going to go over here and do this thing to the white leftists. And I'm going to go over here and do this thing in Latin America. And I'm going to go over here and do this thing on the continent of Africa, all ultimately with the same goal in mind: suppressing radicalism, manipulating public opinion, so on and so forth. And also coming into, in terms of the United States, again, coming into conflict with maybe the most organized militant form of struggle at that time. Certainly at that time, but maybe ever. I don't know. It was maybe feeling like it was coming to a crescendo of Black militancy. And then here's this, let's give them the prestige. That's ultimately what what Nixon was attempting to do. And the aftermath, I mean, it's been very successful, that, because then concomitant to that is you have the assassinations, the political imprisonment, the destruction of all these radical movements, and the heightened and hyper presentation of the prestige. So that's why George Jackson was so beautifully talking about Bill Cosby 50 years ago, saying, you're running around here playing an FBI agent while the FBI is destroying us. You're presenting the possibility of Blackness in the United States while we're trying to undermine that claim. And George is literally writing, we have to destroy the prestige that you're representing on television. George is in prison and is assassinated, which is, again, a perfect metaphor for the trajectories Cosby would go on up until, for a while at least. But that's it. And then Cosby then becomes, certainly for my generation, they've told us that's what you all are supposed to do. The Cosby Show, A Different World, like you, Jared, there's your, well, this Jared, there's your, your get on it. And yeah. So I don't know if I got, yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. I'm still thinking about, I'm thinking about Cosby and the weird sides of things too, because because it's also like, I do think there's something to the protection, right? I mean, like, this is a part, like, well, this guy's really useful for us, so we look the other way on everything else. Like, sure. Or whether it's just like a power thing, I don't know. I mean, there's so many
examples now that all
the
stuff that has come out, it seems like, it really does seem like, and I've heard other people make the point that it's really hard to look at some of my favorite conspiracy theorists in the face anymore. And it's like all the stuff that has come out, it's like, Cosby looked like a like a routine minor player at this point. And,
right.
And given,
it's
like, why would we stop that? We got all this going on.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
and
but not to diminish, of course, obviously.
No, I mean, no, that's absolutely. I mean, and that's sort of that's the point, that 70 women came out accusing him at some point, something like that, some crazy
I don't know what
number.
the number is.
It was something crazy like that. It was a whole bunch. But the point still being that given what we've still seen, like no disrespect, but that's relatively speaking, unfortunately, not that much. That's the point, not to diminish it, but yeah.
Yeah. No, I understood you weren't doing that. But also, like, yeah, with the Epstein files and everything else, it's like the scale of this shit is crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I have to admit, I just have to admit, I was naive. Like I was naive. I thought I was on the cutting edge of conspiracy. No, 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 nope.
It is much worse. Pizzagate,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I was not familiar with your game.
You know what I'm saying? Exactly. Oh my goodness. Exactly. No, they were like, yeah, no, Pizzagate, that particular Pizzagate might be fake, or that store might not have been involved, but I don't know. I don't know. Anyway, yeah.
All right.
Oh my goodness.
So to go serious for a second,
Mhm.
one of the challenging things always is like talking about these things. And I know this is part of the context, even in which, and we talked about this before, when you wrote the Black Buying Power books, like one of the things you were thinking about is the way that these things actually come up within organizing spaces, right? And so even radical organizing spaces, that questions of buying, one, the mythology of Black buying power is present, and people don't know that it's a propaganda narrative, right? But also, how the relationship to capitalism and all of those things. And obviously, both of us being people who are advocates of socialism and so on and so forth, this is a challenge. But there's also, of course, the reality, right? Which is that we do live within a capitalist system, which I think is one of the things, and we'll come to this, I think, more and more of then people have these questions of like, well, what are you saying that if I live within the system, I can't function within the system and that kind of thing. Leave that aside for now. Because then, it's an annoying argument, but it's one that comes up frequently, right? But the other side of this is like the question around organizing strategy and also different things that the United States government even sees as a threat, right? So Garvey, I think, is really interesting within this respect, and the UNIA as an organization as well. And to some extent, also, I think the Nation of Islam is interesting in this respect historically, right? Because there are movements here that say, okay, we'll have businesses, we'll have cooperatives, we'll have money and resources that we'll direct towards different efforts, right? And I think from an organizing strategy, this is not, I don't disagree with this totally, right? Like I think that the big issue is that whatever you're doing kind of has to be subordinated and directed by a very organized approach where whatever you're getting in terms of resources, that there's some kind of understanding that politics of the organization have to be in command of decision making around that stuff, so that it's not just like we're going to all, just go off and do capitalism and it'll somehow nebulously benefit the community or something like that. But Garvey is interesting to me, and we're in the study group right now. We've been doing Sharice Bernstelli's book, Black Scare, Red Scare, and talking about that. And one of the things she points out is that even though he's anti-communist, and not necessarily immediately, but over time, especially, and other people do as well, like kind of go along with understanding that the state is anti-communist, sort of saying, okay, I'm going to try to shift my messaging as well and make sure that I'm kind of on this. And there was also, of course, a real beef that he had with certain people who were communist, who were maybe trying to poach members and all this kind of stuff, right? But he was still a threat, right? And so I think this is one of the things that gets not weaponized, but used narratively today by folks who also promote, a less organized notion of just Black capitalism, of saying, look, me, Jay-Z, who wants to defend what I like. I'm a threat. Like you didn't start calling people capitalists until I became one, right? Like, um, so this notion, like, I'm just curious how you we'll come back to the Jay-Z point in a minute, but how do you approach these conversations within organizing spaces when people want to have discussions around some kind of economic, some kind of material approach to the strategy where they're like, look, we do live within this capitalist beast and we need resources for our struggle. So we're going to engage it in XYZ way. Like, how do you think through that kind of problem, which I know is different than what you're dealing with in some of these other spaces, but it's something that certainly comes up as a question, I think, for organizers.
So, well, first of all, I have to talk more in past tense because I'm just not in those spaces as much anymore. So, but let me try to answer it this way because I was thinking as you were talking, it's been some years now, but there was a moment, I don't know, probably more than 10, 15 years now, but there was a moment years ago where I thought I might actually have a, 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 if not a one-on-one, a small meeting with Minister Farrakhan to talk about this buying power thing. And I remember trying to think like, okay, if this happens, I got to have, my elevator pitch ready. I got to have some thoughts together. This is not, going to be some extended, we're hanging out type of thing. And I remember trying to think, and it was a version of what I would try to bring, so one, if we're not talking about, in the context of survival programs or something like that, if it's not talked about in that context, I think we're already losing sight of the plot. But I remember one of the things I would have wanted to say to him or to anyone in that sort of organized position. Listen, first of all, sorry, Garvey, real quick, 3 minutes, I think I noted he gets mentioned in this Du Bois documentary. And when they talk about him being sentenced to federal prison, because they don't mention deportation, they mention the 5-year federal sentence. They make sure to point out that it was for mail fraud or some sort of fraud. Like, it's not couched in the context of him being a threat as a radical organizer or any of that. It was let's make sure, as a Henry Louis Gates involved production, that we make sure to point out that Garvey got arrested and jailed for fraud. Okay, all right, but if what I would have wanted to say, something like what I did say in those groups, like if anything that is approached in an organized fashion is going to already be of more benefit. If there's an already like a pre-organized, okay, here we're organized, now we're going to enter into this endeavor on this basis. And what I wanted to say, like, to Minister Farrakhan or anyone in that situation, look, instead of promoting the myth of buying power or myths of capitalism and entrepreneurialism and fantasies about, misrepresentations about what they can actually do for Black people, why not use your example as a microcosm? And I mean, you could talk about it. I think I heard you saying just now, like, yeah, we have Nation of Islam businesses and we have a Nation of Islam infrastructure, even some productive capacity for some of the goods services. As I often joke with some of the folks I used to know, all the, like you socialists always invite us to do security, like we provide a security. Like you always don't, you don't want to do our nationalism and our Islam, but you damn sure call us when you need some security. And so you have services, and use that to say, almost like what I've said in HBCU spaces. Let's use the relative access to resource and organization that we have to demonstrate both the potential and the limitations of the effort, and make that more of the discussion and the argument to say, okay, look, at Morgan State University, we get X amount of dollars from the state. We get X amount of dollars from these contracts, this, that, and the third. Here's our budget. Instead of creating this wild class tiered system through pay, let's redistribute what little we have, and then always point out, like, this, like, kind of like what Cuba does, like, make it the Cuban model, like we redistribute what we have, but we don't have much because of these imperialist capitalist block, and then say, like, so we have our little businesses here, we try to do this, but we can only generate X amount of dollars because our consumer base is broke. We are overcharged for supplies. We don't get the venture capital investment. We can't expand. We have to compete with, Walmart or, Giant or whatever. We have limitations. Uh, you know, uh, the price of eggs went up, so our bean pies cost more. Like that could really be helpful. So when you see the guy standing on the corner selling the bean pie and the paper, that should be used to explain the whole economic model of the institution and in all of its positives and potential and what are its limitations. Then we could, I think, come up with some. If I'm following you, that's sort of what I was trying to say. Like, instead, going back even to what I was saying to my student about the eyelashes, if you're doing a service and teaching a skill, this is beautiful. Set an appropriate rate. Let's not exploit, your classmates and, consumers. Set an appropriate rate and make what money you can make. This is fine. The moment you start saying, this is the thing I can teach you to free you and free us, and this, then you start to distort what is actually the condition of the community, and then we have a whole set of different problems. So that's in general how I would. And then, honestly, and sometimes, especially when I was younger and more immature, I would just, I'm, and this is something I think, to be fair, I've had to try to work with, I would lose my temper and become more hostile and less effective. So, like, that's not, because it's sometimes it does get frustrating. Like, I remember having an argument with someone. I was like, how are you in this meeting talking this capitalist shit? And I just got so irritated. But anyway, but at a better level, at a better, at a higher stage of maturity and what I'm trying to say.
No,
That would be what I would try to do.
I do. I mean, because I think it like a lot of it comes down to strategy, distribution, how are you talking about what you're doing, and then actually, like, transparency too, like you're saying, of like explain, you know what I mean, of like just being honest of this is what we're doing, and we're putting what we make from what we're doing to this, right? Like that level of transparency. Because yeah, I mean, the I agree with you to a certain extent. If we all are here within this compromised situation, like, we can't lie and say that we're not in the compromised situation. Like, there isn't actually a way for us right now within the heart of the empire to practice socialism, like, ourselves, like, as a system. You know what I mean? Like, if China is still trying to create the conditions for socialism, and Cuba says that they're still trying to create the conditions of socialism, and they've had revolutions, and they've been seriously working on that task for, decades and so on, then we can't seriously sit here and say we're going to functionally do it right now within the United States. But our engagement with the system, I agree. I think it's like, once we start distorting it and making it sound like, once we engage in the prestige, right? It's like, once
That's what
we
it is. Yeah.
try to throw some magic into what we're doing, and saying, hey, like, I can write this book and tell you how to do what I do. And one of the very interesting things, I think, too, is like, a lot of these people, as you and others, I'm blanking on her name, Erica, right? From
Erica Brown. Yeah.
Erica
Dr.
Brown,
Erica
right?
Brown. Yeah.
Dr. Erica Brown, right? Is that a lot of the people that promote these ideas, and this was the point you were making about the student, they are not themselves actually successful. So they're selling a myth. They're selling something that they themselves can't achieve, but they know if they sell it, that they'll get money from that. And so That's yeah.
Look, Steve Harvey just got announced as being at this year's Invest Fest from Earn Your Leisure, right? So, and he's one of my favorite examples of this. Why are you're not rich because you worked the market. You're rich because however you want to frame it, you worked hard, you're a talented comic. I don't care. I don't care about judging. But you got rich because you're a comic. You do Family Feud and you do whatever the hell else you're doing. But then
Yeah,
you're
the
going to
morning
come here
show,
and
all that. Yeah.
the morning show, you're doing all this stuff, writing books and whatever. But then you're going to come here to Invest Fest and tell a black audience that is paid like $1,000 a ticket that the pathway to success is through market fundamentals. I don't, whatever the hell they're preaching there. He's definitely not going to stand up there and say, you just paid $1,000 to come tell me to hear me tell you how I'm rich because I'm a good comic, or I signed a great contract with Family Feud. Like they're not, that's the part that's, and then just to quickly double back, because you brought it back to a point I didn't complete, that one of the points that I would like have made and do try to make in certain spaces is to say, if we're going to talk in some positive capacity about surviving in a capitalist system, we should also do it in the context of teaching socialism, studying political economy, et cetera, and so forth, so that, because the argument I was thinking about that I had some years ago started with that kind of often that oft repeated quick dismissal. What are you, a socialist? What is that? That socialist stuff? Or we can't even do that here. Or, fine, I'll grant you that for the, but what is socialism? How would it look in this world? What might we learn from studying its history and its principles? And like we don't have, that's the thing I'm saying. We like, okay, look, I get it. I just submitted my grades like 2 hours ago. Like I'm I'm not doing some revolutionary work. I have a job, but the point wouldn't be then to say, but you can be successful if you went into enormous debt, getting 3 degrees, and then got a little underpaying job at an HBCU. You could also be successful in this system. That's where the lie, that's the part that's irritating. You could say, look, go, like we were talking off air a little bit. You want to go to college, go to college. Go to college, get a degree. Don't go to college, you don't go to college. You got some other plan, do some other plan. Whatever your plan is, as long as you're not promoting it as the grand solution for all of us. That's really my point. And that's what I think is, and that is the hustle. And that's where that meta deception comes in, that we are all invited to participate in, and where we are invited to con ourselves. Because we're supposed to see the successful person and think, damn, even if I'm going back to my shitty conditions, at least so and so is down there living it up, and salute, live for me, it's all that kind of thing. It's like, no, fuck that. Like
So
you live like that because I can't. That's the part. Anyway, sorry. Yeah.
no, you're right. So let's talk about Jay-Z a little bit. So I mean, one of the things that's I admit I find some like kind of there's a certain amount, a certain degree to which I become in awe in a certain way of the ways that people can defend something, right? The ways that people come up with, I mean, and Jay-Z obviously very, very talented, right, at what he's done to build his wealth and his, not this is wealth, but as a rapper, as an artist, super, super talented. And so it's not surprising, right, that he can come up with witty things to say. And it is interesting to me that he is one of the primary vectors of this argument at this point, or defenders of this argument at this point. And basically, a lot of the versions of his most recent version of this argument, which then I do see repeated from people, right, is that if you're critiquing the Black capitalists in particular, that you are functionally supporting white supremacy, or you're functionally supporting white capitalism, because, I mean, and there's various versions of like really bad faith ways that he talks about this, like of, oh, you didn't have any problem with, when the white people were doing it, but once I do it, and then there's the argument he gets into, which really has nothing to do with whether someone is a capitalist or not, of this question of what's too much money, right? Is it 100,000? Is it 150,000? Like, at what point does it become a capitalist, right? Which, of course, I mean, like, these are super bad faith, and there's no engagement, of course, with what capitalism really is, what it really means to be a capitalist. The fact that by any definition of it, he now is one, right? Because he owns means of production in different areas, right? And and we could have an argument about the fact that it's still subordinated in many of the respects and many of the businesses that he does to bigger white capitalists and white capitalist companies and so on and so forth. But yeah, how do you address this framing? Like, I'm sure you come across it. What are your responses? I know you probably have videos too where you specifically go into
No,
this
I
with
mean,
him,
but it's as I've said for a long time. I mean, Jay-Z has been, again, up until the Black album, for me, my biggest contradiction. I loved his music from before day one, before Reasonable Doubt, all of that, and I listened to his music going in to defend my dissertation, all that kind of stuff, like to get amped up, the arrogance, the bravado, the all of that shit. I loved all of it. The way he rhymed, the beats he selected. I was a big. I saw him live a couple times. Like I was a fan. So that's actually one of the ways I start having the discussion if it's about Jay-Z. I will start with that to in many ways with my students, almost as a device at this point, I think, now that I think about it. But ultimately the point that I tried to just clarify, because it's not that hard to really, I think, once the prestige is removed, is what does his material success mean for anyone else? What does it, and what wealth has he created for himself and the industry, for others? What has not been redistributed? And then more recently, the as he's involved himself more with politics and ownership and discuss, what arguments is he making relative to either certain movements like Colin Kaepernick or other sort of motion in political spaces, with the whole we're moving past kneeling into ownership and don't pay attention to the gentrifying in Brooklyn, pay attention to my less than 1% ownership of the Nets or whatever. It's like that kind of try to draw those distinctions. And then also I would be able to use some of his older lyrics just to remind people of what he's always just been saying about himself. He is talking down to us as customers, as inferiors, as lessers. And I know as a fan, it's cool because that's part of the whole gimmick. And Dr. Tiffany Patterson, I haven't seen her in years, but she gave a presentation. I was at a Black Studies conference years ago. And I remember she was part of her line that I think about all the time, where she was saying, talking to women and saying, how Black women deceive themselves when they're at the club and they're listening to a song referring to women as bitches. And then these women turn around and they say, oh no, they talk about those other bitches, not me. It's like, so it's like when he's talking about customers and you're this and that, it's like, oh, I'm loving it. He's talking about them. He's not talking about me. But that's part of the trick that we play from the meta deception and the prestige of it all. That I'm not. I'm in the in crowd. I'm not. And anyway, I don't know. And then also just to try to use him to talk about class and presentation and I used to use the scene where he was in his own documentary for the Blueprint. No, not the Black Album. Remember when he's shopping the album? And somebody else just did this recently. Some rapper.
Fade to Black, I think it is. Yeah.
That documentary, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's a new rapper that was on a video I just saw doing the same thing where they take the album to the white executives and they're literally playing it to a boardroom of white folks sitting around a table. And I'm like, this to me is I at the time I remember saying this is a confession. He's showing us like you're not the audience. Like, he's not. You're much like black people in voting for the Democratic Party. You're taken for granted. That's why Obama didn't spend any money with the black press. It's like I don't need to. I have you already, but these executives have to sign off so that I can get marketed and distributed and get their audiences and get the real money and all of that. So I don't think I'm adding anything meaningful here, but that's essentially how I've tried to address him. And then because he does promote so much of the black mythology, black capitalist and buying power mythology in his lyrics and his discussion, I mean, it's very easy to pull stuff from his music or his interviews and just say, see, this is look at what he's saying here. It's almost like what Steve Baskin does in that Perlman debunk. It's like once you slow it down and put the quote up, take a little bit of take the beat away, take the performance away, and you just slow down. Focus on this line here. Look at what Perlman's doing with the phone right here. Look at his sleight of hand right here. That's the moment that he figured out the number that he's going to say later. He revealed through his mind because he just read it off of the thing. Like you could do that with Jay-Z or somebody else. Say he's saying this here. He's saying that he's not interested in you beyond being able to manipulate you for his own personal enrichment. So that's at least the attempt. That's the attempt.
Yeah, for sure. And there's interesting debates going on in the chat about whether or not what type of capitalist. So this connects.
I'm missing the chat. I'm not seeing the chat right now. So yeah.
No. It's all good. It's lively today. Shout out to everybody in the chat. Thank you all for joining us and engaging in the discussion. So I did. Interestingly, I came across, and I don't actually remember, as I was like prepping for this, I came across the book. I think maybe I was searching books about black capitalism to see some different stuff. And Rachel, I may mispronounce her name, Laurier, something like this.
Yeah, I don't know.
So she comes, I think, from JP Morgan Chase, I believe is her employer.
One of those, yeah.
Yeah. And she's a black woman, right? Like, and she wrote this book called Black Capitalists, A Blueprint for What's Possible. And folks, you'll have to refresh, but I did add this video to the show description as well, because you did about a 30-minute video on this book as well. And partly talking about how Questlove and Touré and some others were talking about it as well. But also you read it and you did some examination of like what her argument is and how she frames it and all that. But she basically argues within it, from my understanding, and I have not read it, that black folks have been at the forefront of developing a form of capitalism that can benefit others, right? That does not exploit others, right? Which gets to the kind of some of the discussion going on in the chat right now, because again, it gets into this important discussion around whether capitalism is an inherently exploitative system, right? And this is a quote from her, it's ultimately, quote, more productive and more inclusive way forward, right? And so she advocates for what she calls strategic participation in capitalism by Black folks. Um, and so I know that it's been a while since you probably engaged the text directly, and folks should go check out that video for a more direct engagement with it. But yeah, anything you would want to respond to from within that.
So this is, I count her as part of, so what I have noted in line to maybe one day produce in what would be this, if I write one more thing, that's the last thing. Like, this is it. Because I'm not him. Let's just leave it at that. I'm not him. But I have she's on a list of in my notes of in a section that I would attempt to argue is part of a new wave of rebranding Black capitalism. So it's part of the Jay-Z thing. It's part of the I forgot who else is on this list, or who I've even seen recently, but this Black bourgeoisie recovery effort of sorts. And she represents like the worst form of Pan-Africanism to me as well, because she does come from the diaspora. She tells this, and I also went and read through at least some of her dissertation too, by the way. It's more or less the same thing, but in part because recently I did my review like a year or whatever ago. I don't even remember how long ago. And then like just a couple of weeks ago, she went at me on Instagram and said, I saw your video, and it's unfortunate that as another Black scholar that you would tear down a Black woman. That was her argument. And I was pissed. I admit I was pissed. So I responded, I screen grabbed it, did a whole Instagram post of my own taking her quote, and where included my response, which was in part to say, don't disrespect, like I was trying to say, like, don't disrespect what Black women suffer by saying I'm attacking Black women because you wrote a horrible book. Like, the book is terrible. And I'm look, I have a lot of self-criticism, and a lot of imposter syndrome around my own writing. So I don't, I'm not saying this is like but I'm just saying politically, and in terms of your argument around Black capitalism, this is a horrible, it's just a horrible argument. And what she does with Du Bois and Fanon in the book, she uses Du Bois and Fanon and other, I'm forgetting everybody, but to justify and defend her brand of Black engagement in capitalism with this nonsensical claim that they're almost heroic going into Wall Street and into these white male dominated spaces and carving out an existence that is less exploitative, and it's like, so my point, really one of my points was, if you kind of like what we were saying earlier, if you want to make this argument, you could be honest. You could say, look, here's how I'm defining Black capitalism. Here's how Black capitalism has been defined by others. She straw woman, I think she was talking about a woman. She says it's a she or a her, that she straw woman's this anonymous person's argument to get her story started, saying, I wanted to give this presentation at Yale about my thoughts on Black capitalism. And of course, there's this, I don't forget exactly, but it's that kind of thing, this radical academic who, of course, wants to raise some questions, but she doesn't say what the questions are. She doesn't say what the critique is. She doesn't say who the person is. She doesn't do any of that, all to just set up this thing of, and in response to this radical lunatics, I've stood up and found this, this powerful argument around how Black capitalism is a good thing and it's been misrepresented. And let me use Fanon and Du Bois to, it's like, I'm almost shocked she wasn't in this PBS documentary, now that I think about it. She should have been, they should have went and grabbed, and Because
Maybe you
ultimately
should
that's
be
what
her agent.
I should be her agent. They should have. You know what? PB Gates, Skip, holla at me, and I will get you your next superstar lined up. So yeah, so that was really that. But she's part of, like, this is maybe the most egregious form that I found so far. There was another book that I found that doesn't pretend to be what she's pretending to be, but does kind of a similar thing around the value of the black dollar. Like, there's this whole new, maybe it's not as new as I think it is, but it's like a cottage industry around telling black audiences that there's nothing wrong with capitalism. There's really ultimately only something wrong with your mentality, your grit. You know, so Laria does this thing where she does that thing that Sudeep and I are criticizing in our Donut King series. That she does that. My mother, we came over here with nothing, and she taught me this work ethic, and I think from Ghana, and I took this Ghanaian ethic into to school and got myself into Yale, and and got myself to JP Morgan, which is proudly promoted throughout the book. I mean, it's amazing. She's not there talking about all the scandals and the billions that they've been, reportedly over the last few years fined and all this like, she's not, none of that. This is all about, and then the rest of the book, she uses Du Bois and Fanon to justify her argument in the most diabolical way. And then the rest of it is anecdote. I talked to my friend who was from Nigeria and got a job on Wall Street. I talked to my other black friend from wherever, and they got a job on Wall Street. And look, they're not harming anybody. They're working hard in these white male dominated racist spaces that, ultimately, as she has to say, are very open and welcoming because she's working for JP Morgan. So she can't say that all this white male dominance is bad. So there's ultimately something good from it. And, with the right, work ethic and mentality, and then ultimately, because of the reference to Du Bois and Fanon, and who was the other one? She can then be tacitly saying, without being explicit, you don't need any radicalism. You don't need Fanon for his militant anti-colonialism. You don't need Du Bois for his socialism and his Pan-Africanism. You need them for some, I don't remember exactly how she does it, but for some vague black pride and inspiration as you go and get your job on Wall Street or wherever. I mean, it's just really bad, but it's I do think it's part of I don't know, maybe it's just my hyper focus on it lately, but it's part of what Jay-Z is doing with the rebranding. Don't be mad at me for don't call me a capitalist as if you're calling me the N-word. How dare you? Don't do that. And the all the other podcasts and the people who've been critical of me, like these other, the Breakfast Club spheres, the Onyx Impact people, this well promoted and funded, because that's ultimately what the history of black capitalism teaches, is that their quote unquote relative success, just like any other capitalist endeavor, is connected to what capital is interested in supporting. And I just think it's amazing that, again, even when there are no black people involved, capitalism does not provide some white utopia for whites. So it's like, I don't understand, like, even at that simple level, I don't understand why this is so easily argued. I do understand this. I understand it's simple, but it shouldn't be that easy to, yeah. Anyway.
One of the things, so I haven't read the book yet, but one of the things that strikes me as you're describing it too is, like, how does working for JP Morgan even make you a black capitalist? I mean, it makes you a black person who is working within the white capitalist bank. Like, so, like, I guess that's the strategic participation that she's talking about, right? Is like that you're participating in these structures, but you're trying to make them less repressive or oppressive.
Can I just share this? I'll just share this.
Yeah.
I have this right here where she says, I define black capitalism as a pragmatic theory that accounts for the ways actors, and I made fun of you, so look at how I've highlighted this page here, by the way. Just as you know, I've highlighted literally the whole page. But anyway, I define Black capitalism as a pragmatic theory that accounts for the way actors, individual and collective, proactively reposition themselves within capitalism to achieve social good. These definitions, which prioritize social good and monetary profit, are crucial to how I make the case for the creation of a more equitable version of capitalism throughout this book. The point is not simply to occupy a more powerful position within capitalism, but to participate in capitalism in such a way that engenders social good for others and limits the exploitation that capitalism as we know it is built upon. According to this framework, being Black and or actively engaged in capitalism doesn't inherently make someone a practitioner of Black capitalism. One must repeatedly choose to have a communal mindset and remain committed to advancing social good. That's why I was saying it was super extra diabolical, because now it's being redefined as social good for all, not just Black engagement, because that old Black capitalism is when you all just went out there and made money. My Black capitalism is when you do it with the social good in mind. Now, again, don't take, I'm saying promise, but don't take my word for it. Everybody should read the book. Nowhere in the book does she explain or demonstrate, certainly with data, how this form of engagement with Black capitalism has meant any material benefit for anyone outside of her handful of anecdotally selected Wall Street colleagues. So I mean, it's
you know, it's a playbook, right? Like you can see the DEI there, you can see the corporate responsibility kind of doctrine. Like these are branding efforts, you know what I mean? But to redefine Black capitalism as for the social good, yeah, that's messed
and
up.
only
And
as that. You, under her version, you have to see it as being about the social good. It's really diabolical. That's why I was very hostile to the book, and so she, but as I pointed out to her, I didn't say one word about her as a person. I didn't speculate about anything. I think I've even said more here about her immigrant background and the use of it than I did in the video. I don't know. Maybe I did. I don't know. But my point is, I was looking at the work. So this whole thing of you're attacking Black women, I was just like, that's. I responded to that with even more hostility. Actually, I was like, don't do that. Don't do that. You said you watched the video. Explain. All it would take is for you to say you got this wrong. At 10 minutes and 32 seconds, you said I said this and it's wrong. If why anyway, that's I really don't like when people do that. I really don't like when people do that, and it just makes me more angry. So it doesn't make me back up and think, oh no, let me be more. No, that's bullshit. That's bullshit.
Yeah, and I think like to this point, Sith Lord Prince, I mean, I think this is the problem with discussion of like strategic participation or these sorts of frameworks and discussions, though, is that like, first of all, she's not saying do it towards socialism. She's saying do it from a better, to create a better version of capitalism, right? So I do think how people define the end goals and what they're doing is important. But I also think that although she does make some reference there to, that it could be organizations or groups of people, primarily this is a book that's about individual engagement. And I do think it's a form of cope, right? It's also like, this is what I do, but I'm going to make it, it's again the prestige, right? It's like, I'm going to sell you now on something to help you all feel not just good but great about what you're doing within these spaces, right? And I will say, like, because during different phases of the BLM movement and everything around this, there was a lot of DEI anti-racism initiatives that were going on in like the nonprofit spaces that I worked in, and I participated in those efforts, right? Because I didn't, first of all, I didn't know that much about it, but also I was like, well, let's see what we can do, right, within some of these spaces to advocate for certain things. And when I left my last job, like one of the things that I remember vividly was another person who was also in management. I was in management. Um, saying what you're doing is like union organizing, and we don't like that, right? Um, and because and this is why I really call bullshit on these kind of like corporate responsibility or DEI efforts associated with a like trying to make a kindler, gentler, right? When you will face severe antagonism within these spaces is when you welcome conversation about what people should be paid and what people should be paid for, like based on, oh, like there's discrepancies in the wages between the race of these workers and their job titles, and what, you know, the lower level of labor, not lower level of labor, but the people who are paid at the bottom of the sort of structure, right? These are predominantly the people of color within the organization. The white people are you start making those kind of discussions, and you will not be long for that kind of space. And so, you know, I think that's it's they're putting a real like lipstick on a pig on what these sorts of efforts are, and it's hugely beneficial to groups like JP Morgan or whatever to have somebody out there as an ambassador who's making these arguments on their behalf and making it seem like they're engaging in something that's genuinely for the social good by allowing this more inclusive space. Even if she's saying like, look, I go into these rooms with these white folks and have the, you know, the hard fight at the table or whatever it is, like, you know. And I mean,
Even if she makes some vague reference to capitalism not being equal
yeah.
in some general vague way. But and I think they even get a greater benefit from her in particular because of her sourcing being her source. Like she's not building her argument on the John Hope Bryants and the Thomas Sowells and the Walter Williamses and the whomever. Like she's not building her argument on them. She's building her argument on Fanon and Du Bois. Like that's the thing. Like so that's what has me more upset than anything. You're not even doing just the standard, you know, stereotypical. I would have not said a word about the book if I had bought my Kindle and opened it up, and it was all Thomas Sowell told me this, and you know Rupert Murdoch, and you know, and not Rupert Murdoch, the Berkshire Hathaway guy. You know, these are my godfathers of finance, and my, you know, like I love them, and the black versions of them, and the, you know, the Robert Smiths and the, you know, like, you know, I'd have been like, all right, this is just another, you know, whatever. But no, she's saying no, I'm redefining black capitalism, and I'm using these wild radicals as the foundation for my art. It's like this is so, yeah. And then she can go out there and it ultimately, because ultimately what she's saying is it may look like, and may even be uncomfortable to experience a mostly white male environment. But if we approach it in this way, look at how they will still make room. We can still be in there. They'll make room for us. And look at me and this colleague. And then I'll tell you a story about my friend over here. And I'll tell you about this friend over here. And I'm reading it like sitting here saying, okay, all I could just open up, even out here in these tree-lined streets, I could open up my window right now and find 5 black people that are jobless and need, you know, or like that are not, you know what I'm saying? Like are not living that life. You know what I'm saying? So the idea that these anecdotes should stand in for the millions of what is the more routine experience is, I just, yeah. And then to say that my whole argument is about tearing down a black woman is just crazy. That's even, and then she can say that while praising JP Morgan. Like, how dare you? You know what I'm saying? Like, you serious?
Well, and that's the deeply frustrating part about some of these critiques too, or not critiques, but these positions, I guess, is that like, and I again, I haven't read it, so I don't want to mischaracterize anything, but like, you know, I mean, banks have engaged in so much exploitation within, like, I mean, literal, like, wars are fought over this stuff. Like, I mean, there's the whole boat of cocaine from JP Morgan, which is not even like a, that's a whole side point.
Wait, let me do a
But
quick word search for cocaine. I don't, nope. It didn't. Thought I might have missed it. That section on.
um, but like that's so besides the point, right? Because the exploitation of mortgages and all these financial instruments and all of these things, right? Like it's not, and that's the hard part about these kinds of arguments, is that it becomes so kind of individualized, or like, I can work within this thing, and this is how I can treat it, and this is how I can work in with the money that I make and with these limited things to, and like I remember the Instagram quote that you pulled up in that video. And I will just say, for folks, people have asked, what are we talking about? Rachel Laurier, I believe is how I might be mispronouncing her name, but I put the name in the chat. But I also, if you refresh in the show description, the actual video is in there. The book is called Black Capitalists, primarily. But
a blueprint for what is possible.
Yes, the blueprint. Yeah, and again, it's self-help stuff, right? It's telling you, like, hey, if you read this book, you too.
Do you remember Barbara Ehrenreich wrote a book on the self-help
Yes.
industry? Do you remember that? I remember that. I like that book. I had a copy of that book. She was dope, man. She was pretty dope.
Nickeled and Dimed is the one that I remember from Barbara Ehrenreich the most.
Yeah, that was her most famous. Yeah.
I need to go back to some of her other work, rest in peace to, yeah.
Yeah, because she wrote another one where if I remember correctly, because I don't think it was Nickeled and Dime, but she starts off, it's hating on Oprah. And I was like, yep, you got me. I was like, we salute Barbara, we right here. I was like, and you should see her in oh man, what was that movie? That documentary. I used to show it every semester too. Where she sings the song Nickel and Dime. She performs it. She plays herself working in a diner as she explains how she did the Nickel and Dimed book in this documentary. Damn. Anyway, it'll but yeah, salute. My bad. Anyway, sorry. It is self-help. It's a bunch of self-help stuff.
I think she, maybe it's is it The American Ruling Class?
Exactly.
I think that's what it's called. Yeah.
An excellent documentary, by the way. I used to show it every semester. I used to use it as a final for one of my intro to comms classes. I'd be like, watch this and answer these questions as your final. And it's very well done and does a lot of good things that people in these spaces can make a lot of good use of, maybe even still today. But yeah, she's in that also. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. All right, there's some stuff in the chat. Thank you for all of this, Jared. Again, folks, make sure you're subscribed. If not, to I Mix What I Like, Black Liberation Media, and African World Order, so they can catch all of your content there. Pick up The Myth and Propaganda of Black Buying Power if you have not. I Mix What I Like, a mixtape manifesto, all of that work, a live reinvention. Anything else you want to shout out? I'm going to go to some of the comments.
I just want to say, I did want to say publicly to you again that I really think the work you all do here is fantastic, and the preparation you bring, the level of conversation and interview you bring, the depth is fantastic, and I appreciate the invitation to talk a little bit about this. So thanks.
It's belated. We should have done it a while ago. And I know also on some level, I mean, my excuse is that you've been teaching 7 classes a week or whatever all semester. And so it's been hard to get you on, but it's not really true.
I don't know. So first of all, look, if we're being perfectly honest, I really do. I know people don't think I'm being serious when I say this, but I do think, like, I've lowered the intellectual level of your platform today. And the interviews you have they really are high level, and then you've stayed focused on much more, pertinent issues, that don't get as much attention. So I don't have a problem with whatever time it takes. And yeah, but seriously, because
Well,
like I watch a lot of this stuff. I don't see everything, but I watch a lot. And yeah, even for me today, you were more prepared than I'm used to, and all of this other stuff. So shit, Yipper. Now, I know Yipper is my anonymous nemesis, but I can assure you, I've had one teaching assistant in my 20-year career at Morgan, and that was many years ago. And now, by the way, Morgan signed up for a $60 million Obsidian AI, which is supposed to do the grading for me soon. So my job, I won't lose my job, they assure me, but it will get easier.
oh man. Yeah.
By the way, real quick, did you see, we mentioned Du Bois in the documentary, says he went to Fisk. Did you see how Fisk just signed $1 billion contract, AI contract, to do a data center, to host a data center at Fisk? We gotta get
Dwayne Monroe back on.
Yeah, you got to get Dwayne Monroe on that immediately, because yeah, that's, oh my God.
It's scary. I mean, I do plan to talk to Radhika Desai tomorrow when we have her on about AI as well, like the bubble and like all the fucking investment and shit that's being done to just prop up these companies for this. Yeah, it's bad. It is bad.
It's really bad. Yep.
So first of all, no, not at all. It's not the first time that we've been in
yeah.
conversation or hosted here. It's been a while, and he sent me this piece like late last year. So that was really what I was referencing, is it's not
well, but it worked out perfectly, because then who knows when it's going to come out anyway. So I definitely appreciate it. But really, I honestly, I'm very happy to do the interview, but I sent it to you and a few others more. I needed to get, I want to do more to get feedback on stuff, because it is helpful. And Dylan, who's referencing there, sent back some important feedback. Ori did as well, as did you. So I appreciate it. So
I don't think I sent back important feedback. I think I just said, like, this is great. So it's,
that's important feedback. I count that as important feedback.
All right, so let me see some of these comments real quick.
Sure.
So first of all, just for this question, because I saw a bunch of people, folks.
Yeah, what is the next? What is that?
You got to pay attention. Yeah. But first of all, this is the main thing, is that the study groups you do have to be a patron. You can even be at the like $1 a month or $10.80 per year level. So thank you folks for a couple folks signed up during this. I appreciate that a lot. It is my version of the self-help book that can teach you too
how to sign up on my Patreon. You're one step closer to freedom.
But jokes aside, what you do get with it is, and I need to refresh a post on this, but you can join our Discord, where there's a lot of other folks, great folks, a lot of folks in the chat and so on, that have conversations all the time, which I can't even keep up with at this point. I'm sure you've experienced that as well, Jared, with that kind of stuff. But but I really appreciate it. And there's brilliant folks, there's organizations, there's all kinds of people that participate on that level, and so there's some good stuff that happens there. But we do study groups. The biggest challenge these days with them is that I do have to, until I can figure out an alternative, I have to cap them at 100 people, because we do them on Zoom currently, and if you go above 100 on the Zoom license, then it becomes webinar, and that's not the style. Like the way that we do it is actually, we get together and we have conversations in small groups, and so we use the breakout room feature. And most of the conversations you have is like with 20 other folks that have all done the reading, and you talk about it for like 90 minutes. And that's basically what it is. It's not it's not me delivering anything and saying this is what you should get out of this, and it is not self-helpy in that frame. It's just really having discussions with other people, which I do think comes to the question that somebody posed early on, is how can you read Fanon and come up with conclusions like this? And I mean, Barack Obama talked about reading Fanon, right? Like, so like
Absolutely.
the reality is, I think that if you are not studying with other people and engaging with other people, and importantly, ultimately organizing, I think, with other people, but I think studying can be a good maybe precondition to that, or entryway into that. That you can read that book and say, well, a lot has changed. We're not really in the same position, and then you start to take pieces of it and say, well, I think this is a good line here, where I
Can I
understand
show
this.
you one example?
Yeah,
Since
go
I
ahead.
have it, since I
Yeah,
just
go ahead.
happen to have it sitting right here.
Yeah.
Just one example of how she does this. To be a black man on Wall Street. Du Bois, who coined the phrase double consciousness, and Fanon, the author of Black Skin, White Mask, were prominent black scholars of their time who created useful theories about how black men can reclaim their humanity after being denied it through Western colonialism and slavery. Du Bois believed that a black man's pursuit of higher education is the way to achieve distinguished life and to peacefully exist in a multiracial society. Fanon's solution to this problem was self-invention, making the active choice to decide for yourself who you are without concern for the white gaze or the history of slavery and colonialism imposed on black people. That's how you do it. It's fucking diabolical and should be called out and condemned. And I don't give a fuck who you are. That is some bullshit. That is just, yeah, exactly. That's how you do it. Leah, I just saw Leah's. Yeah, that's what exactly. That's exactly how you do it. And she's not stupid. That's what makes me even more upset. She didn't read. So, and Wretched isn't quoted either, by the way.
Don't want to point people towards that one.
No, but even Black Skin, White Mask, like even to use that, however you want to describe that in comparison to his other work, is like, come on, man. Like that's just. So that's what I'm saying. That's. Oh man, it's just condemnable.
I think Obama did read Wretched, though, right? Like, isn't that the one he cites? I feel like
I'm
did.
sure. I feel like he did, and I remember specifically because I actually read all of his books, which is just, that's another thing. But
that's another see, you talk about the levels I go to. That's a level that I'm not.
Oh, really, but the hate for him was so strong, and it was the proximity to Glenn and Bruce at the time. Like it was a moment. I was in a zone, but he would do. The one I remember that I always reference, he said, because he said, I have profound respect for Kwame Ture, but I went and saw, but I remember I saw him speak, and I just remember thinking, this is something about it being passé, like it's just not relevant. It's not relevant anymore. But all respect, like yeah. So all of that stuff, and then you have the people creating the meta deception for you, all of the scholars that I and others don't like, and who write all of these things about these, you have them helping out the expansion of the performance beyond the stage by writing about how Obama is a continuation of Malcolm X, and he's the new Dr. King, and he's an extension of those movements, and this is us overcoming. Like, you have everybody else saying what he doesn't say. So when Obama would go up there and do things like when he would in one of his, I think it was even the acceptance speech, where he made the allusion to Langston Hughes without saying his name, and he said he made an allusion to a dream deferred, so he can just sprinkle out these blackisms, and the people who know are like, see, he's talking to us, but he doesn't have to actually say it, and then other people will fill it in and say, see, he was talking to you. Let it wash over you. It's wild.
The Easter eggification of everything.
Exactly. Exactly. And then exactly. See, they thought he was thinking about us. He thought,
Seven-dimensional
see.
chess. Um, all right, this comment, is it less about the wages for their labor and more about their ability to become part of the bourgeoisie and selling that as actual liberation? Um, yeah, I mean, I think this gets to some. This was earlier on that this comment came about, and I flagged it, but I think it is a lot of selling the idea, right? Because I think this is one of the things that I actually really appreciate about this piece that you've written, and how you're working with this concept now, because I think there can be a tendency, and I think you do this well within the Myth and Propaganda Black Buying Power book, actually, of looking at the political economic reality and saying, like, this actually doesn't line up with these claims. Like, this is what they're making here is actually they're inventing something that's not actually connected to a material reality in order to sell ad space, ultimately, in order to promote a certain kind of market and niche of, you know, businesses, basically, and being able to advertise their stuff to certain markets and so on. But beyond that, like, when we talk about black capitalism, it, as you point out, it really is just an idea. Like, it isn't a thing. There's not something that we can, it's, you know, when these discussions are had, it's not a discussion of, like, you know, how does Ghana's economy function within the world system or something like that, right? Like,
Right.
it's a conversation about, it's selling you a mythology or a propaganda, basically, to tell you that you should, I mean, it's actually, I think, more about what it's telling you not to do than what it is telling you to do. It's pushing you away from radical rejections, organizing, trying to imagine, understanding capitalism as fundamentally a problem and a system that needs to be defeated in order to do something else, right? To say, no, you can participate it and it'll be, but this version will be yours. It'll be for your people, you know, and you can benefit from it. And you can, because you will have the resources, you can distribute them how you want to. You won't have you won't be beholden to how the white capitalists distribute these resources anymore, you
Yeah,
know?
no,
And I think
and
yeah.
no, I like what I think you were doing there. That yeah, we could look. We can go to really any country, and you could say, look, you know, Ghana has the land. It generates X amount of tons of cocoa that are then distributed to Switzerland or whatever to turn into chocolate. I don't know, whatever the hell is, you know, something like that. And you could point to something that's actually happening. You could or maybe even yeah, but with black capitalism, I'm just, you know, there's almost nothing to measure because there's nothing, like, you can't point to anything. It's not able to nothing is generated to the level of some supply, some demand being supplied, or even some demand being created to be supplied. Like, none of that is happening. So it's all just, at best, black people playing some very minor low level role with a handful making relative pockets of money for a broader capitalist system, uh, uh, that is itself part of an international system that is producing wealth for, again, I think they said 1% in the world have 54 trillion in wealth. Is it the world or the US? Now I have to double check that. But whichever, 1% having 54 trillion in wealth is, so again, yeah. So what should be a global criticism of capitalism and imperialism and its manipulation of everybody is turned into a promotional campaign for black liberation. And that's crazy. Um, while I'm here, real quick, just now that I mentioned, I did just see an early screening of Boots Riley's new film, Boosters. And
What are your thoughts?
the only thought I was going to say to share was, I think I'm not promoting people to go see it because I'm saying it's good. I'm promoting people to go see it because I'm interested in hearing what people say about it. Because I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if I'm biased by the debate I've been seeing him have online and why he's taking all this Ellison money. I don't know if I'm biased by, I'm not a fan of science fiction and horror just in general. I'm not like I don't know if I'm biased because I saw it with my oldest daughter and there were a couple of scenes in there that I wasn't ready for that have messed my head up.
There always have to be a couple of scenes that you're not ready for in a Boots Riley production. Like there's always is.
And I should have been more prepared given that. But there were two in particular that I was just like, oh my God. And it was just going on way too long. So I don't know. That's what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that it is not, I'm not coming here to report the mistake I made some years ago with American Fiction. So I'm not doing him. Toomey corrected me on that one permanently. So there's no, you know, all jokes aside, the more complicated thing is that I do think Boots is trying, he's trying to do something. He's trying to do something. I just don't know that he can or that this does it. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I do plan to see it. So yeah, maybe we can a group of us can get back together and talk about it after a group of us have seen it.
But I'm sorry, but the reason I brought it up is because something that you said about had me thinking about how instead of teaching us how we are all in this, right, instead of having an exploration of Black people's engagement in a capitalist system, teaching all of us our role in this international hustle, which I think Boots does try to do in this film, and I want to credit him for that. We're being taught that there is no international hustle, that all is basically good, and that we can all just do better within it if we, get ourselves together, if we, get our mindset together and read Fanon differently. Because what did she say? He said self-invention. Oh my God. We can self-invent.
He's referencing I love boosters, which
I love boosters. Yeah. So the DC and to his credit, I forgot the exact name of the group, but the DC, I'm sorry, I do have it right here. Labor Heritage Foundation, the DC chapter of the Labor Heritage Foundation hosted this early screening in the one theater that is technically not in, just outside the DC border, that is left in this area where you would be able to see a film like that. I think it's the last one in this area, in DC at least. Man, there's a couple in Baltimore, but yeah. Distributed by Universal Pictures. I saw Samantha. I turned the chat on again. Yep, it is. Look, yep. And he said, you gonna give me 20 million, Samantha? Did you see him on Twitter? He said, Samantha, you gonna give me 20 million? Then be quiet and let me get my Ellison money in Universal distribution. I didn't. Did y'all give him 20 million for his film? Then shame on you. Then be quiet.
We should do something on it. I did.
We should.
In a stream with Carlos a few weeks ago, I did talk a little bit about my thoughts on the whole thing, and I have very conflicted, thoughts around all of it. I really did not like the way that he engaged in that debate online.
I didn't either.
I didn't think that was necessary at all. And I think that, he probably, and this is not even to provide a defense of working with those people and so on and so forth. But I think it could have been as simple as like, this is the reality of Hollywood and I'm trying to navigate it as best as I can. And like, but the
same point I was making earlier. Yeah. That's the same point, like a version of what I was saying about the nation or HBCUs. The best I think you can do in that space is to say, look, man, I'm trying to get this movie into 3,000 theaters. For me to get this movie into 3 or 4,000 theaters, I need Universal. For me to get Universal, I got to have a certain script. I got to get some money. I got to do that. I'm trying to do this with my movies. I'm trying to do this with my art. Here are the limitations. And then maybe to have a discussion, particularly with the people in those radical spaces from where I saw some of these criticisms coming, and say, look, let's have a discussion. Like, I would be interested in that part, because I did think about this, and I've been thinking more about this in terms of all the discussions we've all been having around third cinema and creating new forms of an audience and all this other kind of stuff. And I do have my own, like, I do wish he would have not taken the money, made a lower budget film, not been in thousands of theaters, and then just used his relative fame and position to go online and say, look, we're gonna barnstorm like they did with Crushing Wheelchairs. Fundraise, get us over here. We'll screen it, and we'll do a national tour. We'll even put on a little concert. You can get we'll put on a little show with some musicians. We can do a whole thing. I would have been 100%. And then even if this was the exact movie, I'd have been like, this is the best movie ever made. I'd have been like, this is the greatest film in the history of film. Because at the end of the day, I'm like, okay, so, because all we got for the budget was, you got Demi Moore and some other famous actors and some special effects that I think don't help, that for my limited biased preferences don't help. Who are we talking? Mtume, that he put me onto that one in that movie, Michael Fassbender playing the Irish political prisoner. And there's that.
Is it Hunger, right? Or is
Hunger?
Yeah.
And there's that scene where he's sitting talking to the priest, and it's a one-shot scene. I think it's done in one take. And Mtume would say it's like maybe 10 to 15 minutes of just two men sitting in a room dialogue. And I'm like, I was riveted. Couldn't take my eyes away from the screen. I don't need all of that. I don't want all of the bells and whistles, and I'm distracted by it. I'm grossed out by it. I'm like, put a scene together, put some good dialogue in there, and then maybe you don't need 20 million. That would be my preference. Then telling me, and then going online and saying, basically, fuck all of you. I got to get paid. I got to get this money. And I'm doing the best I can. And you should love my art because I've tried to put some radical messages in there. I don't know.
Yeah, there's a lot to engage with around that. And I've talked to Mtume, obviously, about it a lot, and he has his view. And if you were able to I was able to go up to the New York premiere of his film, The Hand That Feeds, which if you see it come to a festival or something like that near you, then definitely do that. But yeah, I mean, there's a whole range of topics really that are associated with this, right? Because there's the question of scale, there's the question of funding, there's a labor component that comes in where people then say, well, you don't want the crew to be paid well. Like, there's all of these kinds of aspects of this that come up when you talk about these things. And there's also the question of what can art really do within certain confines and constructs, and what does people going to a movie theater to see something like this actually do to them politically, versus if you do take a different approach and do approach it as an organizer. And it's fascinating because I did do an interview with Boots 2024, I think, and in that interview, I talked to him about, like, well, what should people do if they don't have your kind of resources, or they're starting out or whatever. And funny enough, he gave the whole Barnstormer spiel that you're talking about. He's like, that's what you should do. He's like, you make it for whatever you can afford to make it for, and you do it, old school Barnstormer street team. Get out there, get to as many cities, get as many organizations and groups. And so he's not necessarily opposed well, he's not opposed to that idea, but for some reason, it's not also the way that he sees as the best way for him to engage too, which is, another thing. But
So
anyway,
like, but then you don't get to
yeah,
do stuff with Don Cheadle, and you don't get to do, have Demi Moore in your film, and you don't get to have, Keke Palmer maybe, like the
and Lakeith
sister that
Stanfield, and yeah,
Lakeith Stanfield and all that, like whose role in this film, someone will have to explain to me the purpose. Honestly, like I don't get it. Honestly, I don't get it at all. So, and that may be my limitations. I'm not that deep, whatever. But I'm like, if the point is to get this into more theaters so more people see it, so more people become radicalized, I'm sitting there like, I don't know what the hell that's supposed to mean. And I'm supposed to have already been where you're trying to get people. So like, I don't, I don't know how that's supposed to work, but maybe I'm not, okay, but the sister that Mtume had in his film, one of his films, who was in Boots's previous project with a bigger role.
Yeah, Kara Young.
I really like her. She's reduced
great, yeah.
But she's reduced in this film to almost nothing. And no disrespect to Keke.
She did have a pretty big role in
the series,
Virgo.
right? And I'm a Virgo, right? That's what I'm saying. But here it's like she's reduced, and the first thought I had was, is she suffering because they could get a more famous actress to play something else? And I'm saying, because the more famous actor, no disrespect to Keke Palmer, I don't think she's better than, what's her name again?
It's Kara Young, I believe.
Kara Young.
Kara or Kara, but it's yeah.
And my point would be, if you had another actress playing Kara's role in this film and Kara playing Kiki's role, I think the performance would have been better, humbly, no disrespect. And then I think you also may be able to get around some of that budget line item. That's what I ended up thinking. Like, but anyway, I do think folks should see the film, and I would love for us to have a conversation about it. Especially because it is doing, it may be more important that we do, because it is claiming to be doing the work that we want art to do. And that was the one thing in the Du Bois documentary that I at least appreciate that they included, was his comment from the Harlem Renaissance about what he thought art should be. And I agree with Du Bois on this, that and essentially he was saying, if it's not propaganda for freedom, then don't do it. And I know it's a little overboard, but essentially I'm in agreement with that. So what else are we doing shit for? Like, but anyway, yeah. So here's someone claiming to be doing that. So I think we owe it to them, as people concerned about those ideas, to see it and say what we think about it.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's a good point. I mean, because the thing you were talking about, and we talked about it earlier, it came into my mind, and I can't even remember what you were saying that made this come up, but I thought about Wendell Pierce. And like, I'm not saying that he has, I know that he's liberal essentially, and he doesn't, it doesn't have like revolutionary politics in that kind of way. But when Nicolas Maduro was kidnapped by the US government, he had a lot to say, condemning it vocally on Twitter. And I thought, this is a guy who's played a CIA agent on a series in Venezuela that's about undermining the regime in Venezuela, in Jack Ryan, right?
Oh shit, he was in that. Oh right.
Yeah. The series, the Amazon series. And I'm like, what do more? I think this is the question of the prestige, right? Is what made me think about this, and these ideas that people promote. It's like, what really are more people going to get out of you, Wendell Pierce? Are they going to get more out of you ranting against this thing, which you should do? I'm glad you're doing it, right? Or the fact that you play a CIA agent, right? And we can say that, okay, this is strategic participation. Okay, he's getting some, maybe he donates to good causes. Maybe he supports organization. I don't know what he does with his money and his resources and so on. But like, what is ultimately the bigger
Yeah.
impact of that, right? Like, what ultimately you're promoting the idea of the CIA as this inclusive organization that's fighting for good in the world somehow.
Look, if I can just personalize it for a quick second, I think because I agree. For if when some of my critics will say Jared Ball ain't shit, he look at what he said or did here or there. His argument is this, his behavior is that. It would never be helpful. It would never win an argument for me to then start to lay out, well, look at all the things I do privately. Look at all the, let's just pretend it was this long list, this impressive list of things that I do off record. Nobody's going to care. They would be like, especially in the context of a heated argument, they'd be like, I don't give a shit. None of that. First of all, if it's all true, you've spent all this time out here playing a CIA agent. I really do think that. That's why I keep saying the only mistake I think Colin Kaepernick made was doing the Nike commercial. It just immediately, it just immediately undermines everything else. And it's not, meant to be in a heavy personal critique, but it just does. So if you don't, so yes, I'm glad to hear that he said all. I didn't know he was doing all that. I'm glad to hear that he was doing all of that, but it doesn't come close. Because if anything, people would see it and be like, "Oh, the CIA agent is tweeting." He's saying that my favorite CIA agent is tweeting against the Maduro kidnapping. All right, well, that's cool, I guess. I don't know, whatever. And then they just move on. It definitely doesn't balance it out. It definitely doesn't balance it out. You can't go out here in whatever I'm trying to say. The more popular version that is distributed and co-opted is what is going to win, and that's why it's there. And whatever you do privately will make yourself feel better. You've talked about it on here in not maybe exactly in this way, but I've sent however much money to these Palestinian causes, and this, aren't I great? Don't I feel? I mean, I'm wonderful, right? So, like that's just how. And I don't know what I think everybody gets what I'm trying to say. Like it doesn't mean that it is not enough to do some sort of nice, quiet act if your public performance is indistinguishable from anybody else at best. Like he's a great actor. We see him and it's wonderful.
Yeah. On that note, people should, you reminded me just to remind folks that I do heavily encourage people to support the Samir Project in Palestine. I know that in Gaza, like things are really, the resources flowing in are really drying up, and the fucking Board of Peace debacle. I saw some article on it the other day that like of the $7 billion that were supposed to be pledged or whatever, that there's like 125 million that they have, and like nobody knows anything about what's happening with that money or what it's doing. So it's just
they're planning this. They're what are they running their next AI Gaza beach renovation pictures or whatever. No, it's gross.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? Like that's that's what their energy is. And just a quick connection to that. I hope whoever's in your audience is finding whatever ways possible to boycott this World Cup. I mean, I'm loving the reports about lack of hotel sales and tickets. I just hope it keeps getting more and more. And including myself, I hope to not watch as much as I hope to not watch. Like I don't want to promise to not watch anything. That would be the goal, pun intended. That would be the goal. But
I've been to your house. That's gonna be hard for nobody to be watching the World Cup.
Very, very difficult. It's going to be crazy difficult. We even had to have some struggles around why we're not going to any games. Even before we got to the inaffordability of it, just
Right.
like
It's super
I'm not,
expensive. Yeah.
yeah, I'm not taking, um, I'm not going to be delivering my potential ICE raid victims to ICE. Like I'm not doing any of that. I'm not giving these people any money. I don't want to, I really do want to boycott the whole thing, even as I'm not a big fan of boycotts. I just want there to be as much reporting as possible saying this didn't reach expectations. We didn't reach, but because it's just gross. And who the hell, like, how are you going to have like all this entertainment and shit while you killing and bombing and genocide? Are you inviting people who you're at war with? And then, I mean, it's like, it doesn't even make any goddamn sense. So anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, he's
It's
lifting
wild.
some of the bans apparently. Like he's making arrangements now, and he's reducing the cost of the visas now, and they're doing all this last minute stuff, rebranding and trying to, we're welcoming you, and that's like, how could, I don't know.
Yeah, it's wild. All right. So this
That's
was
not
about
what
the study
happened.
groups. The study groups. The next one soon. I'm actually gonna do smaller ones this summer. Like we're gonna read individual like essays and do 1 or 2 week groups here and there. So there'll be a new one soon. The current one that we're doing actually winds down the end of this month. So I just have to figure out. But there'll probably be one in June at least, and
And then you
so on.
announce it
So
through Patreon.
yeah, so actually, I mean, so that was the point I didn't finish saying is that I do the announcement through Patreon. I have been doing a short video to also announce it on YouTube usually, but you have to sign up within 24 hours because it fills up that fast at this point. Like, I always have people come in and getting on the wait list, and usually they often get into because not everybody stays consistent with this stuff. But yeah, it's they fill up quick. So anyway, I have to figure out some framework in which I can broaden it out, and I haven't figured that out yet. So anyway.
The only ones I know, the one that I used to look at, it just costs more money, like that crowdcast service and stuff like that, where you could build out, you could have the breakout rooms, if I remember correctly, and have, if you pay more, you can have more people participate.
Yeah, I might
That's
look at that.
the only one. Yeah.
Yeah, I
It's
might
been a
look at
while,
that.
but that's the only one I remember looking at.
All right. Let's see. The bridge between capitalism and socialism is the development of the productive capacity. It might not need capitalism, but capitalism is historically the way many nations industrialize. And I mean, this is the key point, though, right? Like, what is the unit that we're talking about here, right? Like, and you're talking about a nation, right? And I think this is a big part of the discussion, right? Is if there is to be a black capitalism within what's currently constructed of the United States, does that not necessarily require a black revolutionary nationalism as a strategic organized component to somehow actualize that, right? Because otherwise, again, it's not that nations are totally like somehow operating outside of the global economy and imperialism and capitalism. Obviously we know that, and that all the problems that that creates, but at least at the level of nation state you have the ability to create policy, to create what's going to to tax, to create what you're going to do with the money that's generated from those productive developments, to figure out how you can build conditions for something like socialism, right? Or even in before you can achieve socialism, still, what are you going to do with that money that benefits your people on some kind of national level? And I think
Exactly.
this is again like a problem with just talking about it within this context, is we're talking about black people they exist within the United States of America, right? So you're working for corporations in this context, taxed by this structure where the resources are distributed in the ways that this system decides. And wages,
So
exploitation,
that's,
all of that, right?
oh,
Yeah.
I'm really glad you brought this back up, because I did mean to say it earlier, but lost track of my own discussion. But that's exactly right. That a lot of these false comparisons, whether it's the black buying power is the equivalent to someone else's GDP and this, that, and the third, always leaves out that initial stage of organization. If you are organized as a nation with political power and public policy control and this, that, and the third, then you could start having these conversations. At which point I would just say, then again, why would we be having black capitalism and just have a socialist, a black nationalist, revolutionary nationalist, socialist country or whatever? Like, but then it also goes back to these other questions. So then, well, first it goes to the question of and why I think I was wrong in my initial approach to the book in the first place. That had I couched it in my actual belief and argument around an internal colonial theory or approach, then the question would be, what value is there to a so-called black capitalist economy within a colony? With it, or what good is black nationhood if it's colonized within a settler, within its a larger settler colony? What ultimately are we talking about? So yeah, I think that's a really good point. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, there's like, to the main thing for me is like that these things have to be articulated, right? Like there has to be some kind of program, some kind of, and this is all of that becomes foregone for just basically the promotion of participation in this activity, and a kind of, I guess one of the things that is most frustrating within both the Jay-Z and that Rachel Laurier piece is like that there's this, they're mystifying the exploitation within the system also,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like
Mm-hmm.
they're saying like, well, I don't exploit people, right? Like I'm just, I mean, Jay-Z literally kind of says that, like,
Yeah.
you know, and
And it would be great if we could look at it. So let's look at Rock Nation. Let's break it down. Let's look at the numbers. How much are you paying staff? How is the revenue distributed? That's sort of, again, my point. You know, you know, stop telling me at Morgan State that we can't hire a teaching assistant for Dr. Ball when the president is now making over $700,000 a year. Like, and then stop telling me that we're operating as an oppressed community within the racist state of Maryland. Yeah, I grant you that, absolutely. But they just reported Morgan State is worth $15 billion to Maryland's economy. How and all these salaries are public. I'm like, you sitting up there publicly waving in my face that you decided it was important to raise your salary from 5 to 700,000, but we can't hire another adjunct, or we have to reduce the staff, the custodial service hours in our buildings. So we're lucky if the soap gets changed and we get toilet paper changed out. I don't. I'm like, so that's what I'm saying. So it's like, yeah, Jay-Z, let's break it down. Are you not exploiting your workers? Let's see it and show me. Rock Nation brings in X amount of dollars, and the person making coffee has got all this health care and is making $50 an hour, and that would be dope. Then we could model that. Let's model that out, and I'll be a Rock Nation supporter.
I mean, yeah, even I'll just say, even just because I went to the concert last week, when I look at Beanie and Freeway and the clear health issues that they have struggled with, and Young Guns and all these folks up there is a part of me that, and I don't think they would approach it this way, right? Because they look at it like, even in hindsight, and they may have, I know they've said different critical things at different points or whatever, but like I think they still look at it ultimately as he gave us a chance. Like he put us on, we were there, we had big records, we had success in those periods, right? So that I think even whatever disagreements, disputes, etc., maybe they're talking, maybe they're not, right? What was fascinating is they still perform all those songs. They're still yelling out rock, like all that stuff, right? And they can't not, right? Because this is their catalog of hits. This is what people came to see, right? But I'm sitting there thinking, he's living like that, and this is the crew that he came up with in the period where his fame was like skyrocketing, and they were on all those albums doing all this stuff together, and he has no relationship to them at all anymore. Like he does nothing for them. And like you can't tell me that that's not exploitative. Like I don't care if they made some good
Absolutely.
money in a certain period of it, but like they need, it's clear to me watching that show that like they could benefit from some healthcare, some resources, et cetera, right along the way. And we can say that's not all his fault or whatever, but like let's not pretend that he doesn't have a role in all of that too.
And then he benefits from their branding and their promotion to whatever extent. Just quickly, I misspoke. Let me clarify. I did misspeak. I moved the decimal point. It's 1.5 billion that Morgan State impacts the state of Maryland with. So I just wanted to. Oh wait, did I not share the screen?
Oh wait, hang on.
Thanks. I just wanted to make sure I put that up. I don't want you to be accused of misreporting. So just to clarify. But 1.5 billion Morgan State generates annually from Maryland. So let's, where's that? Why? How? Where? Who? What? Where's that? Yeah. And then to your point there, that's absolutely right. That has like, and I wonder to what extent, how much are these older rappers promoting record labels and former partnerships that were then or are now exploitative? That's deep. That's
I mean, and I don't know how they could get around it, right? Because like the way, I mean, it's a funny thing about the music too, right? Like that there's so many times within the lyrics, hooks, etc. of the song that it's like, you know, it's the rock, right? So it's like you can't really do those songs for an audience. I mean, they could, I guess they could just be quiet during that part, um, but they still do it, right? And it was interesting to me to watch it in that respect of like just just seeing, I mean, and they're working class folks at this point, and they're still doing a great job and all of this, but like there's a huge difference from where he is now and where they are now, and they very much participated in the support of his career. And I mean, people have talked about it, but like a lot of the which mattered more in the 90s than I think it does now, but a lot of the street cred that he had
Mm-hmm.
in that era came from
Mm-hmm.
people like Beanie,
Mm-hmm.
and Beanie's talked about that on like his Drink Champs episode and all that kind of stuff. And so, you know, and there's a certain point at which he kind of shies away with it. One anecdote is, so when he did have the meeting at HCZ, the person in the room that I talked to afterward said that the conversation was this, that he wanted Harlem Children's Zone to work with him to set up a Brooklyn Children's Zone, and to help him get investors together and to work with them and to build one. And Jeffrey Canada said basically some versions, obviously paraphrased secondhand, but of he liked him, he engaged with him and all of this, but he would have to come out and join his condemnation of the Stop Snitching campaign, right? That he would have to join his call to get Busta Rhymes to say who murdered, was it Israel Ramirez? I can't remember the name, but there was a student from Harlem Children's Zone who was Busta's bodyguard that was killed in a shootout that Busta witnessed, and he wouldn't talk about it. He would have to come out
That's right.
about that. There was the whole Cameron thing about Stop Snitching, at the point where there's a very funny video of Cameron. I don't even remember who he's talking to at the time around that, but it was like a CNN clip that went viral. So this was a big thing. And Jeffrey Canada really wanted to promote the idea that people should be snitching, which is a whole other, a whole other side of this. But Jay-Z said, "I can't right now because I'm putting out American Gangster, and it would really tank the sales or the promotion of
Wow.
this album at this point for me to be associated with something that's, like, supporting what you're trying to do if I'm trying to promote this other image."
Especially because Frank
You know?
Lucas snitched too. Like it's enough snitching already associated with that whole story. So like, yeah, that's wild. But that's sort of also connecting all the way back to the beginning. That's part of that meta deception, that you have to carry the con beyond the performance for it to be effective. And that's what I think I liked so much about that attempt there. To point out that the claims that these people are making while in front of your face on a podcast or an interview or a song or a movie or whatever is the performance. But to maintain it, they got to manicure all this other stuff. He's got to be aware. To your point, he needed Beanie to be the thug on the side. He needed what's the name? Who else did you see at the show? The State Prop, all of them.
Yeah, Freeway, you know, those
Freeway, all
Young
of
Guns.
them.
Yeah.
You need all of them to give you that. I have a team. I'm in the streets. This and so that people, when they see your performance, it has it means more than it should. Like I remember as a fan, I mean, it meant more to me. I remember watching two people argue years and years and years ago. Actually was in a Greg Carr class at Howard University. They were arguing in the back of the class, who's better, Jay-Z and Nas? And one of the dudes was breaking it down, and his argument was Jay-Z is better because the numbers he references in terms of drug sales, weights, and amounts and costs are all real. I know this from my life in the streets. So I was like, yeah, and well, now it makes more sense. Like at the time, I was like, yeah, Jay-Z, yeah. But now I'm like, yeah, no, that makes sense because that's part of what makes the success of the art is if you believe the whole everything that he carries that outside of the studio. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. No, totally. That was exactly, the thing. And first of all, I would love to connect with different people who have worked there, who have been students there. And we could talk about it and we could figure out something that we want to do because I think there's a whole story there that needs to be told. But, for various reasons, I can't be the one to tell it all by myself. um, but I do think that this would be, I'd be very interested in connecting with people to talk about that kind of stuff. And to this point, yeah, I mean, like, I should have said this and I didn't up front, but look, I was one of the most politically confused. You know, working there really fucked me up ideologically for a lot of years. That took a long time for me to like work through, and so I will say this that like I'm definitely not on team Harlem Children's Zone as like a model of what should be done. I actually see it, quite nefariously in general. I don't even know. I mean, the Zionist component is interesting, but more than anything, it was a Wall Street project, I would say. And there's a whole bit to get into that about the gentrification of Harlem and all of that. But I think the whole thing is quite a mess, and it would be good to talk about it with people that actually have the politics to discuss some of that stuff because there's a lot to dig into with all of that.
Yeah, that sounds wild.
I mean, like one of the big funders, for instance, is like the CEO of Home Depot, Ken Langone, right? Like he's connected in with all the fucking ICE
wow.
and everything else. Another one was Stan Druckenmiller, who was like a billionaire who made most of his money, as I understand it, within the crashing of the sort of Asian markets in the late 90s, right? And so there's all kinds of stuff within it all. Yeah, it's wild. Yeah, there's a reason why we used a burned down Chase Bank on the front cover of Laundering Black Rage. Yeah. Shout out to Two Black, Rasul Moat, for the work y'all do.
Yeah, but that's only because those two fools didn't sit down with Rachel Aya's book first. If they had read that, then they could have gotten rid of that whole laundering. All you need to do is get a job at J.P. Morgan. You don't need you getting all upset and enraged. Just get. Anyway, yeah, that's crazy. J.P. Morgan is, oh my God, yeah. The pathway to freedom. Like all banks.
There's more to be written about how Black elite turn a lot of radical theory into self-help. That's another project for you, too, Black. You got it.
Absolutely. And like if you did, like even going back to what we said earlier with the Ehrenreich book, if you took, if like I think like a Black radical addendum to that work, even starting where I think she did with Oprah, or mention, like Oprah. I think that's absolutely right. And again, I don't know if I'm just over doing it with what I'm focused on, but it just does feel like there's something happening now where the Black bourgeoisie is trying to redefine and reclaim itself and re-justify itself. So yeah. You say we failed. Yeah, you failed. It's okay though. You can always come back and write another one. It's all good. It's all good.
All right, let's see.
But definitely read her book first, so that you and Rasul can correct yourselves going forward. Read her book and learn how Fanon and Du Bois can teach you how to be better capitalists.
I need to go through a deep dive of this, but I believe that they either worked together at that time or Druckenmiller and Soros. I have to dig, but it is absolutely the same situation.
Look, it is when I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. What were you gonna say?
Just when Oreskes and Conway talk about how that ruling elite funded Milton Friedman's Capitalism and Slavery to counteract the Communist Manifesto and the Bible as popular books. Like again, so there's a history, a track record of the elite saying, no, we need to put books out there. Like we need to have a specific narrative and a specific argument to counteract. So I can easily see them if we needed to get to that level of the smoky boardroom of saying, can we find, how hard would it be to, did you see that Yale dissertation from what's her name that got published last week? Maybe give her a job.
Yeah.
Maybe, yeah. Hey, you're a publisher. Why don't you publish that book? And then, yeah. I mean, yeah, that's what I'm saying. I don't want to speculate. I'm just saying it's not. And then more broadly, how can we get more of these narratives out there? Like
right. I mean, that's the thing is it's a lot of times in my experience being in and around the smoky boardrooms, it's just that like you have people in these spaces who are already ideologically aligned, right? Yeah. But it's like, but they do, diversity is a thing, and having people in the room that, but they want, of course, that like you're on board with this stuff, right? And then, yeah, like, hey, Rachel, like, let's get this out there. We need to, yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, we saw how big during the post George Floyd, like that moment of all of that, and shout out, read Laundering Black Rage, right? Because Two Black and Rest will go into all that, but
yeah,
all of that promotion of the Buy Black and Black stories and all that stuff that just was like instant, Amazon Prime putting solidarity with Black people or whatever they use the word solidarity. I know that, which was just like the most.
It's triggering. Anyway. They're messing with us. They're trying to get us to go overboard. That's what. That's how I feel like every day. They're like, I do after watching the Winnie Mandela thing, and I'm like, where they have a whole teams targeting her. Sometimes I know I'm overdoing, but sometimes it feels like there's a little Jared Ball team, maybe just one person on a computer somewhere that says, put that story right there and use the word solidarity in that shit. And just watch him go over. Just watch him spin out real quick. Because why not? They have all the fucking money and resources. Why not? How hard would it be to hire somebody out of college and say, you know what, sit over there and watch this jerk and watch and say some shit that's gonna upset him. Anyway,
this is where also I will say, like, my antenna go up when I read these references to like Du Bois and Fanon and books like that. Is it's like, you know, is this the editor leaning in saying, you know, let's sprinkle a little bit of Fanon and Du Bois in it? Like, we need some, you know,
look at what happened. The chapter that we were started reviewing from that I submitted. The editors said, so it's about a larger discussion of structural violence. Why don't you don't have to, Jared, but you know, why don't you reference Galtong's work on structural violence, since he wrote that seminal essay? And I did. And I made use of it and I quoted it as I thought it was appropriate. And now we could all say we're all on the right side of politics and so therefore then this, that, and whatever. But it's the same kind of process. Why don't you, you know, did you read Fanon in this way and how you could reinvent yourself to whatever she said, self-invent to capitalism? And, you know, Du Bois, we don't have to focus on the socialist, but, you know, there's that double consciousness stuff that's easy to, you know, you go ahead and. So, yeah, I mean, it's not far-fetched at all. And then they did have the FBI's book where the FBI is reading Black literature so that they can mimic Black writing for their own propagandistic purposes. Wait
until we get the AI version of this.
Oh.
Radical chatbot.
Oh.
Black radical tradition AI.
Oh shit. And it probably already exists. That's crazy. No, but they could. I mean, how hard would it be to create an AI, whatever algorithm, whatever they do to monitor this and that writing into I bet you could put a prompt in right now. Write me.
No, you can. You can. I mean, I've done this of like, you know, telling prompts of like, you know, write a passage in the writing style of James Baldwin about XYZ, and it will try. It will try. You know, like AI is still not very good, but it does certain things to try to mimic, right, the way that they write sentences and the types of references they use and that kind of stuff. Like, yeah.
That is crazy. Yeah,
we're in trouble.
We are in trouble.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Laundering Black Rage 2, a self-help guide for navigating the corporate boardroom.
It's written, it writes itself. It writes itself. Exactly. And co-author it with Rachel. Get her to join your team. That is, yeah. So listen, I know I got to wrap up here because I have a 2:00 appointment and it had to get moved back from 1, and I was like, that's no problem because you know I thought we might go long.
But I see
that
you on for.
No, I don't mind. It worked out perfectly, and I really enjoy it. So this has been great, and I don't have to leave immediately. But I just wanted to, I do have a 2:00 I have to go to. So, but yeah,
no worries. I'm ready to wrap it up. That question, I lost it now. Was something about it was so I think it was as you were talking about the things within I Love Boosters that you don't like from style standpoint or whatever. Mm-hmm. Somebody was like, shouldn't we separate the technique and so on from what we think the political impact?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. I agree with that. And that's why I was saying it's just a bias of mine. I wouldn't even I think that's why I'm trying to not say too much because I don't want to ruin anything. I want people to but so I'll just stop there. I agree. I don't think I do think we should be able to separate our aesthetic preferences from the political content. So I'm not negatively judging it on that. I'm just expressing a bias that yeah.
Yeah.
I do wonder if people would think, as I kind of do, that if there was more emphasis on the politics and the content in the story and less on the aesthetic needs of a sci-fi horror style thing, that more could be done in that way. I don't know. But that's my bias. That's there, yeah.
Well, the last thing I'll say is, now that you're not teaching for a while, I'm going to be hitting you up a little more regularly to see if we can have some more conversations.
Anytime,
there's
man.
more
I'm
topics
cool.
I would love to dig in with you. So
no, I appreciate it. No, I really do. I deeply appreciate your platform and discussions. I'm down. And I think even the one thing I thought I might be doing this summer is I'm not going to be involved in. So I'm around.
Right on. No, I look forward to it, man. And yeah, I mean, I deeply appreciate all the work that you're doing on the multiple platforms that you're doing. I mix what I like, Black Liberation Media and African World Order. So make sure you're subscribed to all those so you get all the content and keep up with all the conversations you're doing too, because it's phenomenal stuff. And folks, if you haven't seen it yet, the last thing I'll say is definitely check out the show description for the conversation on Prestige. What is it? Why Black Capitalism Must Be Destroyed? Something like this.
Something like that. Yes.
The Prestige of Black Capitalism Must Be Destroyed. Really good.
Right.
It's like 30 minutes, not 3 hours and 30 minutes like this one. And we'll get to a lot of really good stuff I think you can connect with.
And
so,
real quick, because I see you got it behind you. So let me throw and if you're going to be at Red Emma's or if you're in Baltimore on the 27th next month, come through Red Emma's, and me and Ori are going to be co-hosting Laura at her book event there. This book is bananas, and Renee and I are hosting her on Saturday. So and I know your conversation, you introduced me to Laura for the most part, so I really appreciate all of that.
Yeah, she's great. I got mine behind, and we did talk to her this week. We did a episode on
that's right,
Kill Cullen and counterinsurgency stuff. But yeah, the book is great. I've read it. I really enjoyed it. So there's a lot in it. So yeah,
I just started, so I gotta hurry up and have it more prepared for Saturday. But definitely is very dope. And I even gifted it to my future psychiatrist daughter. Said, let me get you. This is where you need to be headed. You're not going to get this at the good university.
Certainly will not. No psychology course is going to teach you this one.
So, hey man, listen, I appreciate it again. Salute to you and your the undefeated audience and chat as well. Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, thank you, man. Peace.